We are calling to order the meeting of Tuesday, February 24th. We have returned from closed session, and we will now begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. Please rise. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And we do have Spanish translation available.
Sí, buenas noches y bienvenidos de parte de la Junta Directiva del Distrito Escolar de Santa Bárbara. Si hay alguien que necesite la ayuda de un intérprete, por favor levante la mano para darle un audífono. Gracias.
Thank you. We also have headsets for the hearing impaired available. If you notify a staff member, you will get that. So we have introductions, proclamations, presentations, or recognitions, but we don't have a superintendent. So we will pause for just a moment while we wait for him to come out.
I might mention, if anyone is going to talk tonight, we have forms for you to fill out and need to turn them in.
Spanish translation?
We are at introductions, proclamations, presentations, or recognitions.
Oh, that's wonderful. We have with us tonight Teresa Weisglass. Teresa does a great job of running a number of programs, including the AOK After School Opportunities for Kids, AOK program. She runs additional programs such as, I always call it the kindergarten boot camp. I know, Teresa, you're going to correct me on that, but this is a program for kids who have had no preschool experience and who would otherwise enter kindergarten not having any school experience. It's a great thing to put together over the summer. Teresa's always finding a little more money to get other programs in place. So Teresa, would you please come forward and please tell us about the AOK program, no name calling activities in our after schools program.
Thank you, and good evening. I do have a folder for each of you that my Special Projects Assistant Rachel will hand out at the end of the my presentation that'll give you a little more of the facts and figures about AOK, including a variety of activities we've just done over the past 4 months and how they actually are linked to the California content standards. I did just want to remind everybody that AOK is in its 10th year of operation at Adams, Cleveland, Franklin, Harding, and McKinley Elementary Schools. We serve over 500 children daily, first through sixth graders at those schools. SPSD, as the lead agency, has 3 key partners, City Parks and Rec, FSA, and the Police Activities League. Every program has a daily homework session, some tutorials provided by the school for certain students, many enriching activities in sports and clubs. Our primary goals are to support student achievement and to help students gain new skills and build confidence and to behave respectfully and awarely and to understand how their behavior impacts their whole community at the school. So tonight I'm going to talk to you about an activity that all the students have just rotated through. Actually, it's a group of activities, so I can only tell you about a handful of them. But it was in conjunction with No Name Calling Week. And since all of our students rotate through all of our different our curricula, they each got to experience a variety of activities. This first picture that you're seeing, actually it comes from a book that's called Little Ant. And our first through third graders read this book, it's Hey Little Ant. And in this story, it explores bullying and empathy. And so this little boy, you should buy it if you have little kids. It's the greatest book. But anyway, you see this little boy, and of course, he sees this ant, and he's going to, like, squash it, and all their kids are like, yeah, 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 you know. Well, the story goes along, and so there he is, right? And there's the little ant. But the ant speaks up, Okay? This ant speaks up and says, hey, what about if you were me and I were you? Would you really want me to squash you? And so the story goes on from there. And of course, it ends and it doesn't tell you. It leaves you with a question mark, and the little kids have to figure out what should he do. And of course, I'm wondering, like, if they'll never step on an ant again in their life. But anyway, we had the third graders at the end of this think about and talk about who they feel like squashing at times and who they feel might want to squash or step on them, and draw pictures about it. It's a way to help them be thinking about putting yourself in the other person's place. We then, with 4th through 6th graders, we focused on, there were different activities. One of them was focusing on what names are and why they're important to us, and what are the differences between names that feel good versus names that feel really bad to hear. They played grouping games based on personal experiences, and how would they react to different kinds of bad experiences, harassment or bullying. Maybe we could see the next one, which is, so we had them, and if you can imagine, we've got hundreds of pictures because they were all drawing pictures. Well, these were 2 little girls that drew one about, you know, a bad thing, gossiping. She's saying, she's dumb and weird, and the other one says, that's true, and then the little girl is crying, right? And so they were thinking about what happens with gossiping, and then we had them think about, well, what would be a better way for things to happen? You're my friend. Hey, she's pretty. You want to play? And so we have, you know, as I said, literally hundreds of these kinds of pictures. Another activity we had them do was outline and decorate their feet, and using words to represent their ideas about ways that you could stand up against name calling, stand up against bullying. And if you want to do that, I can't tell you the variety of pictures we had. And in fact, in your folder, you're going to each get a different one, all different kinds of feet. But again, you know, what would you do? Strategies, tell a teacher, no teasing, defend others, all of these different types of things that they were coming up with as strategies that they could use at school or in the community to support each other. We ended the week with all of the students participating in an activity where by now they were thinking about, you know, about what was going on and about their school, about their community. We had them do a guided fantasy where they imagined a school or a park where this doesn't exist, where there's no name calling, no gossip, no rumors, no bullying. You want to play. This, for example, was one of the things. 3 boys got together and spent a long time drawing this. And I mean, this really came home to me. I thought, oh my gosh, look at this. It's you know, lots of bullying happening. Somebody taking somebody's money, somebody laughing because they opened the door on this little guy in the restroom, children fighting over here. So those are all the things that they say that you might have to contend with. And then we asked them to draw, well, what would be better? And they went, no bullies. Knocking on the door, is somebody in there? You dropped your money, here, thank you. So, you know, constantly this was going on, and our goal was really to give these children the opportunity to talk about their own experiences and to reflect on their own behavior and to step into others' shoes and think about what they might be feeling. And this is because we believe that creating a safe and respectful environment is vital to supporting student achievement. Children need to experience respect from our staff and others and throughout the school day so that they learn how to give respect, and we need to expect them to give respect. And we believe that, you know, we're helping them understand that when you have that kind of an environment, you can engage better in your learning, you can achieve better, and everybody will move up together. So if you want to just show the last one again, this is the, you know, standing in the other shoes. Anyway, that's just a little tiny snapshot from the anthill to the shoes. And
Teresa, could you also give us some idea of the number of kids who are involved in these programs?
Rachel, do you want to just come up? Because I'm going to have her give you your folder, too. Do you want to just tell them, did all the children go through it, all 500? Yeah, all 500. They may not have done every single activity, but they each did a variety of them. And so in your folder, you know, you will have our fact sheet, our leadership staff, a listing of our activities, and a couple of drawings, as well as a summary of what I've just told
And
you.
tell us where we have our AOK programs.
Again, they're at Adams, Cleveland, Franklin, Harding, and McKinley. And we do have a grant that's providing the program in a little different form to meet the needs of the junior high. And just so that you know, this is funded through a variety of places. The California Department of Education After-School Education and Safety Grant is a renewable, 3-year renewable grant. It is not on the chopping block right now, so thank goodness. Also, parent fees, local contributions, and contributions from our partners.
Mr. Herron?
Yes, I'll just comment. I was at a Lions Club, Host Lions Club luncheon,
Right.
and Sharon Roth was the speaker, and she updated the Lions Club on the program. Just want you to know she was outstanding.
Well, thank you. She's she's our program supervisor. She's also, like me, been with the program for 10 years. And just a parting note about the pre-K, United Way is working very hard this very month trying to get money for that program. So,
Well, thank you, Mrs. Weisglass, and the work that you have done for us for the past 10 years has been tremendous.
thank you.
Don't know what we're going to do when we need to
No one is indispensable.
oh,
Yeah, and I have a terrific staff to work with in all the programs. I could never do it without the kind of staff that we have.
Well, thank you.
And the support from the district has been terrific. Thank you.
thank you.
Well, board members, when we get to United Way's Day of Caring next year, perhaps you'll want to join me to make home play kits. It'll give you an opportunity to work with Play-Doh, and I bet you haven't done that for a while. Well, I do have other items to report on in the superintendent's report. We're at that time of the year. We're about to conduct the state writing tests in our elementary schools and junior highs, and soon, the following week, we will be conducting the high school exit exam testing for our 10th grade students. And board members and, of course, our high school people know that this is a critical test. The federal AYP standards are based simply on this 10th grade testing, which is one reason why there's some variability from year to year. It's not all students in a high school. It's just 10th grade students. Last Thursday, the state approved a 17-month budget with provisions for handling a $41 billion deficit. While this budget is a substantial improvement over the January proposal made by the governor, it still provides for no cost of living adjustment and will result in a loss of revenue of $2.8 million to our districts. Deputy Superintendent Eric Smith will be addressing the budget at tonight's meeting and its meaning for our district. It's one of our first agenda items. The FCMAT team is in the final phase of, first phase, hardly final. First phase of work identifying possible improvements for our special education programs. A confidential survey was sent out to special education parents and staff, and I understand they said that a lot of responses have already come in. Hundreds of responses have already come in. They'll be meeting with various groups this week. They'll be returning in March. They'll be sending out a flyer in March asking for people who may want to meet with them individually, may want to meet with them in private, may want to meet with them in a different location, and make contact with them through some other means other than through the school district. So they wanted me to notify you of that. FCMAT will present preliminary information to the board on March 10, and we'll be talking about the top administrative position in special education, and the full results of their solution-based study is expected later this spring. A Toyota, AKA MM, your lights are on. Go take care of that, please. My office regularly issues a report to the board called the Board Brief. It's a collection of reports and articles on district affairs and matters. A copy of the February 12 Board Brief is on display in the reception area, or it can be found in my office. I would like to highlight 3 of the items from the last Board Brief. The board saw a report, first of all, on required purchases of instructional materials in elementary math, secondary algebra, and grades 4 through 12 English language arts interventions for English learners. These are required purchases. The elementary district, for example, is a program improvement district. We don't have any option on that. We may, however, be able to hold off on making new purchases for the adoption of the reading language arts series in the elementary and secondary district. We will have further discussion of that later this spring. The board also saw an extensive list of high school electives. Students are required to take 80 electives, and that 80 electives compares to only 40 English credits, for example, in order to graduate from high school. Finally, the board saw a letter from the County Education Office giving our last interim budget report a clean bill of health, thanks to Eric Smith, Meg Jeté, and the entire staff in fiscal services. We will use that fiscal health to help weather the storm of severe cuts in funding currently proposed by the state, but we will also need to make cuts in our budget for this next year. Upcoming events, the District Honor Band is on Wednesday night, and I believe we have a flyer on this. Oh, we're printing some up right now. On Wednesday night, Dos Pueblos High School's Jazz Festival and a night of big bands will take place on March 7th. The District String Festival will be on March 9, and our school's spring theater performances begin in March, and copies of our Theater Fest 2009 flyer, which the board received last week, will soon be located on the side table. Thank you. We also have a student report tonight.
All right, San Marcos High School? Do we have
Hi.
a representative from San Marcos here? Great.
On the first meeting of each month, we have a student report. Because of our San Marcos High Schools, because our student representative was unavailable, I understand there was a big game that night, so we let you off the hook, Amy. So we asked Amy Ranzohoff to come back to this meeting to report to the board.
Thank you very much for doing that. I have a quick brief on what's been happening at San Marcos High School for the past few months. Starting off with the marching band, they swept all their competitions this past season and were named the Southern California champions. Our dance team, Marquettes, have also started their competition season and have won 2 events so far this year, including a championship this past weekend in Las Vegas, as they try to repeat as state and national champions. Our show, One Acts, had 3 successful nights of performances in January. It is a series of short plays that were performed in the round, giving the actors a chance to perform in an intimate setting. Our talent show, Royal Blue Review, was held February 19th and 20th. It's San Marcos's longest running show, and it included dancing, singing, jazz band, musical talents, rapping, and skits. Our spring musical, Man of La Mancha, is April 30th, May 1st, May 7th, 8th, and 9th. Our penny drive and our event Kids Helping Kids raised over $100,000 to donate to the Santa Barbara Unity Shop. The Kids Helping Kids event, which is run by our economics classes at San Marcos, featured a silent auction and also a concert featuring Toad the Wet Sprocket and Tyrone Wells, held at the Granada Theater on January 9th. These 2 service events are great experiences for the students to learn real-world skills while they benefit one of the most important local charities. San Marcos also swept the 10-10-10 Santa Barbara International Film Festival's student filmmaking and screenwriting competitions. In this competition, students were able to submit samples of their work, and 5 high school finalists for each of the screenwriters and filmmakers were announced. This year's theme of legends was given to the screenwriters, and they had to create a screenplay with that theme. The screenplays were then judged, and we are very proud of Stephen Amspoker, one of our students, who won the screenwriters competition with his work, The Traveling Legend. The five filmmaker finalists randomly choose one of the 5 screenplays from the student contestants, and we're only given 10 days to create a 10-minute film. This includes the production, the filming, the cast making, the editing, and we are very proud of Aya Miyazaki, who won the Student Filmmakers Competition with her film Beauty and the Breakdown. If you have ever wanted to see a thrilling, exciting, and edge-of-your-seat competition that you can't cheer or talk at, come to the Santa Barbara Courthouse this Saturday for the Mock Trial County Championships. The San Marcos Mock Trial team is looking to defend our county championship with an extremely young team, but we are determined to make it 9 county championships in the past 11 years. Ollie Aquilon, one of our students, recently won the Santa Barbara County Art Competition, which was held for all graduating seniors. And Claire Lombroso won the Galitas Lions speech contest held February 17th. Perhaps somewhat like AOK's No Name Calling Week, we at San Marcos are having Peace Week going on, sponsored by Speak Against Hate Club. It includes various activities raising awareness and education in regards to various isms that are prevalent in our society, such as sexism, racism, and so on. Boys and girls basketball, boys soccer, girls water polo, and 7 individual wrestlers all qualified to make it to CIFs this season. And San Marcos was recently featured on Fox Sports Net High School Sports Show. Fox Sports did one feature story on the San Marcos logo being the coolest logo in CIF, and also showed highlights from our Olympic celebration due to the fact that San Marcos had the most alumni of any school in Southern California participate in the Beijing Olympics. Air Bands is coming up on March 11th. This is our annual lip sync contest. And we are already starting to plan for next school year as our ASB elections will be held March 24th and 25th. One of our most popular events, Mr. Royal, which is our version of Mr. Universe, you might say, will be coming up soon, and this annual sold-out event will be held May 21st at 6 p.m. San Marcos is also saddened by the passing of Debbie Wahlberg. Mrs. Wahlberg was the health assistant at La Colina for many years and also taught the district CPR classes. She has been battling cancer for the past several years. Her services are this Saturday at the Presbyterian Church on the corner of State and Constance at 2 p.m. Thank you very much for your time and your support of San Marcos High School.
Wow. Thank you so much for sharing, Mr. Herron.
Yes, I'd like to just mention, you mentioned Claire Lombroso winning the Galitas speech contest. I would hate to leave Alice Sajak out. She won the Santa Barbara Lions Club speech contest.
Thank you. All right, we will move on to item C2, announcement of closed session action. We do have 2 items to report out of closed session. For item B3, public employee discipline dismissal release. The board voted to ratify the release of a principal. It was moved by Mrs. Cordero, seconded by Mrs. Deacon, and passed unanimously. B4, California High School exit exam waiver for graduation for students with disabilities. It was moved by Mrs. Cordero and seconded by Mrs. Deacon that we approve the requests for the Casey waivers for the list of students with disabilities for graduation, and that passed unanimously as well. And with that, we will move on to C3, public comments. This is the time for speakers to talk about any item that is not on the conference and action agenda list. So if there's anything on the consent agenda that you want to speak on, now is the time. And anything that's not on the agenda at all.
I think Corey Bream might be on this topic, is that right? There is no, you didn't put down what your topic was.
Then now is the time.
I don't think that's
'Cause
on
we-
the,
Yep.
That's the new special ed director. Administration board members, hi. Corey Bream, a parent of a special ed child at Washington. And with all the special ed upset at the beginning of this year, we have since formed a parent committee called the Special Ed Advisory Committee. It meets every other Tuesday night opposite your board meetings in general and right next door. We're hoping to get at least one parent from each and every school and have not been successful so far. Typical committee scenario, we are having the same 3 or 4 people show up. So I would like to stand up here and request that we have more special ed parents come. The goal of the committee is not adversarial in nature. I'd like to start with that. The goal is to work together both with the board, with the administration, and with the parents to make positive, proactive changes for a system that I think I can openly say is a little bit broken. I don't want to overstep my bounds or step on any toes, but it definitely has been displeasing to some, which is why the committee formed. And now the goal is to help move along a better system and design systems that can be across the entire district instead of one school being quite different from another. So that's the goal, and we'd love to have more of you present. Again, it's every other Tuesday. And some people were afraid that we chose this location. I'd like to bring up that we chose the location. It has ample parking. It's the same place every week, and you won't get lost finding it. So it seemed like a really nice place, and it's free, which is good. No alcohol. Bad. So, you know, you gotta have a sense of humor. So anyway, we do need a few more of you there. We send out some reports. They aren't always timely. We are employed and parents of special needs kids, so the reports do come usually within a week. Our new special ed director, Alan Hilton, has been attending. I would love it if a board member attended and that we just have public recognition, both that we're present, we're meeting regularly, we're trying to form a web page so that we can have a link from the school so we can help parents get information in all ways, whatever you can imagine. We hope that we will meet that goal either through further links on our web page or information directly therein. Any questions can be directed to me at drbream@verizon.net, drbream@verizon.net, like dream with a B. So if you need me, I'm there. I'll answer any questions. So far, there's about 6 of us actively meeting. We need more. I think we need at least one board member. Maybe that could be discussed. It needs to be a broad program that we're all involved with to make positive, proactive changes and work together as a team. So I just wanted to report. Any questions? Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other public comment? All right. C4, acceptance of donations.
Move to accept with appreciation.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
It passes unanimously.
I'd also just like to note a special thanks to the San Marcos High School Booster Group for a $25,000 donation.
Yes,
Much
that's
appreciated.
great. All right, consent agenda. Are there any items that board members need to have pulled?
Madam President.
Dr. Noel.
D3 and D6, please.
D3 and D6. Mrs. Deacon?
D13 and also D1, the minutes. I don't know if we want to just do that later. There are 1 or 2 corrections I noticed on some minutes.
Okay, we can do that later. D1. All right. Any motion?
I'll move to approve the remainder of the consent agenda.
Is there a second?
A question? Is there anybody here from Washington School that wants to talk on that subject? Because we're putting it off now quite a bit later.
D13.
D13.
Rejection of all bids, portable classroom relocation at Washington Elementary School. All right. It looks like there isn't.
But we haven't had a second yet.
But we haven't had a second.
Second.
All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
It passes unanimously.
I would like to comment on that. Delay.
Well, we haven't discussed the item at all, but it's going to be at the end of the meeting. Anybody have an objection to hearing public comment on this at this time?
Nope.
All right, we will take D13 briefly before we go on to public comment only on D13 before we move on to the conference agenda.
Corey Bream.
I don't want to talk so often you don't listen, but I'm a parent of a special ed kid at Washington, and they have portables, and they're moving them, and it is a little disorganized, and it should be better next year when the construction's done. But right now, do you know that they are educating our special ed kids at Washington in a closet? So I would like to request that special ed get a portable. It's not complicated, but we keep going to the principal and he keeps saying there's no room, but without exaggeration, we're in a closet.
You know, and I understand, but that is not about the moving, the relocation of the portables, and so that's more appropriate for public comment next time.
Okay, well, it has to do with portables and we need an extra.
Thank you. Okay, so now we are moving slightly out of order from what we usually do. Normally we'd move on to the action agenda immediately. We are taking one item out of order on the conference agenda. So we have F1, public hearing on state categorical flexibility and mid-year budget reductions.
Well, we're starting out tonight's meeting with this because it really sets the foundation for a lot of the other things that we have to discuss. Eric Smith, our Deputy Superintendent, will give this report.
Thank you, Dr. Sarvis. What I'd like to do is really give the board an update on the state budget, which is a budget that basically spans 17 months, which is unprecedented in nature. As you know, last year we went through a budget crisis in this district. We put together a plan, we followed the plan, and basically we had an amazing fiscal recovery by year end, where initial projections last year basically forecasted that we'd burn through our reserve and have a negative ending balance. By the end of the year, we'd not only increased our reserve above the 3%, it's actually in excess of 8%. We did that through a variety of ongoing expenditure reductions and revenue enhancements, as well as one-time adjustments to our budget to increase our fund balance. And at that point in time, we thought we were fairly well positioned relative to the budget we were going to see in 9/10. Well, we adopted our budget in adherence with the constitutional deadline that the board must adopt a budget by June 30th, in the hope that the state would adopt the budget by June 30th, which is their deadline. Well, 85 days later, we got a state budget. And not much later after that, we started hearing rumblings out of Sacramento that a severe structural deficit existed in the state's budget. At that point in time, it was $8 billion. We knew, primarily from our own experience, that any expenditure reductions we make in the current year actually have a compounding effect or $2 next year. The state should have known that and should have got ahead of it, but did not, even though there was 5 special or extraordinary sessions called by the governor of the legislature. It wasn't until the 5th and 100 days into the 5th that we actually saw something completed, and that required a 45-hour lockdown in the state Senate. What I'd like to do now is kind of contrast what we saw at the end of December relative to the governor's January or December proposal, however you want to characterize it, which is generally the first milestone in our budget development process relative to what was negotiated by the Big Five, and actually is what is now going to supersede the January proposal and will basically form the first milestone in our development of our budget for 9/10. As you know, from earlier reports, the $41.6 billion structural deficit over 17 months was basically the result of several factors, primarily due to the decline in the housing and credit markets, and also the volatility of capital gains and California's high dependence on the top 1% of income earners. When things started to go south, things went really south. In addition to that, because of the recession, we had seeing increasing caseloads in terms of a greater demand on social services. So if you look at the indicators, caseloads are up, revenues are down, unemployment's up. It's basically the perfect storm. So the question was, with a deficit of $41.6 billion, how are they going to find their way out of this? Well, the solution at a macro level really was a one-third, one-third, one-third approach, where they basically reduced expenditures by 1/3, basically increased taxes or revenue by 1/3, and basically used internal and external borrowing to deal with the one other third. And the reason I mentioned the internal and external borrowing, it's symptomatic of what's happened in the past in terms of rolling the problem forward. Sooner or later, the state's going to have to pay the piper there. And I just want everybody to be aware that even though the budget's balanced, it's not truly balanced in the way that we would balance the budget at the local level. So at the local level, the primary differences from what we saw at the end of December and what we saw in terms of in February is that the revenue loss on the unrestricted side is not as significant. In the governor's initial proposal, we were looking at a $6.1 million revenue loss over 2 years. Now we're looking at about a $2.8 million revenue loss on the unrestricted side of the budget. However, what we are seeing is that some significant reductions to categorical programs, a 15% reduction in this year and another 5% reduction in state categoricals. But we are seeing some vestiges of the governor's original flexibility proposal where we can use categoricals from the restricted side of the ledger to backfill cuts on the unrestricted side. But actually the categorical flexibility proposal got a little bit more complicated, and now it's basically tiered into 3 different tiers. As you remember, in the governor's original proposal, it was kind of a unilateral proposal where we could take almost anything and use it anywhere unrestricted. Now we're looking at these 3 tiers, and the first tier is those programs that receive no cuts and are not subject to program flexibility. And that would include such categoricals as economic impact aid, child development, QIA, K-3 class size reduction, special education, home to school transportation, Prop 49 after school, and child nutrition. The second tier is those programs that will be subject to a 15% cut but are not subject to program flexibility, and included in this category are adults in correctional facilities, apprenticeship programs, English language acquisition, foster youth, K-12 high-speed network, partnership academies, state testing, ag voc ed, charter school facilities grants, and multi-track year-round education. And then the third tier are those programs that are subject to the 15% cut, and which will be subject to a 5% cut next year, and are subject to program flexibility provisions, and that's basically everything else. So if it's not specified in the first 2 tiers, it falls into the third tier, and we have flexibility. One of the issues with the flexibility is there's a caveat that we have to have a public hearing on how we're going to use the flexibility. At this point, we've been gearing up knowing that we want to utilize this flexibility, but we don't have specific proposals. We'll be bringing those back either at the time of the second interim report or when we bring the plan together, and we'll identify. So the flexibility, I would probably also like to offer that the flexibility is twofold. One, we can use those dollars in the current year to move them from current year apportionments, but there's also flexibility in what we call sweeping restricted ending balances. And I'll speak to that a little bit more. Another issue with regard to flexibility is even though K-3 CSR, or K-3 class size reduction, is included in the first tier that does not allow for flexibility, there was a modicum of flexibility that was basically in a different proposal, and that's laid out here. Essentially, we can exceed K-3 CSR penalties, and as you know right now, that's 20 to 1 or 20.44 average. We can exceed the class size ratios and still take a revenue penalty, but still we could reduce expense by reducing staff if we were going to raise class size. And you can see there's a continuum here where we can go no penalty up to 20.5 to 1, 5% penalty on revenue, 20.5 to 1 up to 21 to 1, 10% penalty up to 22.1, 15% penalty up to 23.1, 20% penalty up to 23 to 25.1, and 30% penalty anything above 25 to 1. I should probably also note that the categorical flexibility, including the K-3 CSR flexibility, is good through fiscal year 2012-2013. You probably remember that in the original governor's proposal, that was only for the balance of this year and next year. So the duration of the flexibility is significantly longer, which makes I feel a little bit more comfortable about that, because if we do decide to avail ourselves, we can put together a transition plan to get back to where we want to be. If we, when I look at 16 months to get back there, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So when we look at the flexibility and then look at that relative to the budget cuts, the only other significant thing that happened there is that categorical ending balances, and we can sweep the ending balances in both 07, 08, and 9, 10. And the idea there is because we're not at year end yet, we can actually move money during the course of the year from the restricted to the unrestricted side of the ledger during 8-9, which is a kind of subtle nuance, but is a nuance nonetheless. As you can see that in the 07-08 categorical ending balances on page 3, there are certain ending balances that we cannot sweep. Those would include special education, QIA, EIA, TIG, instructional materials, CASE, which is the California High School Exit Exam, supplemental instruction, and home-to-school transportation. And then you will also see that the legislature basically rejected the governor's proposal to reduce the reserve level from 3% to 1.5%, the reserve for economic uncertainties, and also his proposal to suspend mandates, which was a sly way of saying we're going to suspend mandates, therefore we're not going to have to pay for them sometime in the future, was also rejected by the legislature. So when we look at this in totality, we know that the revenue loss on the unrestricted side is not going to be as significant. We basically have kind of looked at the 15 and 20% reduction in categoricals, or the 20% over 2 years, kind of consistent with what we've been thinking in terms of holding back about 50%. If we take 20% off the top, then we get the remaining 30 as flexibility in the current year. We know we had significant restricted ending balances at the beginning of this year relative to 07-08, which we think will be able to bolster our economic reserves, because we do anticipate, due to the revenue loss and basically just trend, we will burn some of our reserves. So our goal will be twofold. One, identifying some kind of amount or some amount that we will have to reduce in terms of operating expense, and then knowing that we will also probably burn down our reserves to some extent, but hoping that through a variety of one-time mechanisms, including flexibility, we can restore them back and kind of keep some kind of, maintain some semblance of a 6-7% reserve, because we know that this is not a 12-month, maybe not a 24-month, maybe a 36-month problem. So that's kind of the global picture. I really wanted to identify the differences between the governor's January proposal and what was actually negotiated by the Big Five, approved by the legislature, and signed by the governor. The only other thing I probably should talk a little bit about is the interaction of the federal stimulus dollars. Right now, we know that there's a significant amount of Title I, IDEA, and potentially some school construction dollars that will come to us. We know the Title I will flow through its normal entitlement process. The IDEA, which is PL 94142, or the federal component of special ed, we have questions about whether that will get down to the local level. We know, or we suspect, that there's a supplement and not supplant restriction for the state, so they won't be able to co-opt the dollars, but we don't know that for sure. However, we don't know how it will flow through the SELPA, which is another layer. So there's a variety of things we don't know. The devil's still in the details, but we're hoping that that will actually flow all the way down to us. And then there's the third pot, which is this budget stabilization pot, which the details are really sketchy on, and we're hoping we see something posted on the U.S. Department of Ed website by the end of the week, which might give us more clarity. So when we look at what's happening at the state level and at the federal level, we're hoping we can basically consider all those components in our plan and basically, you know, look at those relative to the cuts we have to make and our overall financial picture. And I'd be more than happy to answer any questions.
I'd like to make a comment as well. There are a number of other districts that are really teetering on the brink of bankruptcy. We're not one of them. We're in better shape than many districts. I've talked to a number of superintendents, many of them in our area, not generally basic aid superintendents. Let me exclude that group. But there are many districts that are really counting on these flexibility provisions and on the class size penalty provisions to stay afloat this next year. And just like us, they need to run on 3-year projections. But just as an example, in K3 class size reduction penalties, if they increase to some 26 students per kindergarten through 3rd grade class, they still get 70% of that money, and they reduce the cost for serving that many students. If they only increase by half a student from 20 and a half up to 21, not exceeding 21, they still get 95% of that money. If they go up to 22, they still get 90% of that money. So they're really seeing that as an area that while they do not want to pursue it, they feel that they must pursue.
Board member questions? Dr. Noel?
On the flexibility issue, I don't see mention here the pupil retention block grant. And I recognize that as a composite of other programs. The list I don't remember.
Yeah, it pupil retention.
Where do they fall in these three bullets?
I believe pupil retention block is in tier 3.
Tier 3. So there'd be flexibility.
Correct.
Okay, I pulled an item, C3, that spends $7,000 of pupil retention block grant, and it just occurred to me as I read this, that really that's spending general fund money in effect.
If you guys
I'll
authorize
raise
that
issue
transfer.
again when we go on to D3 and discuss it, but
Right.
I wanted to make sure my understanding was correct.
Yeah, your understanding is correct after you approve that transfer as part of the public hearing process. So I guess what you're saying is you're anticipating that the board may approve that and move those restricted
I
dollars
hadn't
to
thought
the
about
unrestricted
timing.
side.
I was just thinking mostly about the concept. How far can you generalize that? Because at least I see these items coming through on the consent agenda meeting after meeting, and I ask questions. They say, "Oh, well, that's categorical money," okay. But henceforth, if it falls into
You're absolutely
bullet
right.
3, that's no longer.
As long as the board takes the action, you
If we-
you have the power to move it to unrestricted, and so we can get you a list of tier 3.
Yeah, there are trade-offs there that we really
Absolutely.
start to. Then the next question in this is, what? Again, if we vote to do this, then does the spending freeze apply to those categorical programs, whereas it had not prior to that time?
We had implemented the spending freeze with respect to state categorical programs because we've always anticipated flexibility.
Sorry,
It's
state,
just the
I'm sorry,
federal.
Yeah, okay. So the
Federal's
category
not-
3 is state funds.
That's correct. All
Gotcha.
those are state.
Okay.
Tier 1, 2, and 3 are all state.
That's very helpful. Thanks a lot.
Any other board members? Do we have public comment on this item? Okay. Mrs. Cordero?
I just had a quick question. I forgot that I had this question, actually. I just want to clarify, Mr. Smith, what you said, that the goals of the district should be twofold this year. And I believe I understood you to say the first part of the goal was to identify to make an identifiable amount by which we would reduce the current budget. And then the second part of the goal, I wasn't sure I quite understood.
The second part is, I think similar to last year, we know that probably the number will be too big to swallow in 1 year. We know we have healthy reserves, but we don't want to get into the trap of burning down our reserves and backing ourselves into a corner. So the second part is basically also looking at one-time adjustments like flexibility, sweeping ending balances to keep our reserves at a level that allow us to weather the storm, over 24 to 36 months.
So I understood that to mean maintaining the reserves at a higher level than the 3%.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Dr. Noel?
I'd like just to understand the timing here. This is a public hearing as we now speak, correct?
Yes.
Okay. We're not voting out
No.
of this public hearing.
No, this
When
is
will
a
this come
conference.
back for action?
Well, why don't we review our timeline
Yes.
for going over the budget, for getting the next interim report, for taking a look at a potential list of cuts, and for making a decision on those cuts.
Okay, so our second interim report will come March 9th. And I don't know if we'll be at a place where we can specifically identify all the flexibility things we want to do by then. I mean, if we can do it, we will have it included there and the board can actually look at it. If not, it would be embedded in the plan, which, the fiscal solvency plan, which the board will look at on April 14th. So it'll be one of those two dates, March 9th or April 14th.
Thank you.
All right. Obviously, tonight you don't have a target number that we're going to be getting to. You have said in the past, and again tonight, that you estimate the number will be so large that we won't be able to do it in 1 year. I don't know about fellow board members. I am starting just to get the first contacts from the public about concerns about various areas that may be cut. The first real list of that will probably be at the April meeting.
I think we'll be able to give you an idea of what we think the number is at the second interim.
Okay.
However, then we'll do the remainder of our research. Right now, Brian and I have been visiting sites and engaging stakeholders and getting suggestions. And incidentally, we're getting a lot more suggestions than I got last year, which makes our task more difficult because you have to analyze all that stuff. And then we'll put it together and we'll present it to the board for a first reading on April 14th. I mean, there's an outside chance we might be able to bring the flexibility stuff at the time of the second interim, but I think it's more likely that we'll bring it at the first reading of the plan.
Okay. Dr. Noel?
Are suggestions for things to consider for cuts from board members welcome?
They have the same weight or
Gosh.
more weight than others, so
I thought I made that very clear at our last meeting and the previous meeting. Yes,
Okay.
please.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Well, with that, we will close the public hearing on the state categorical flexibility and mid-year budget reductions and move on to the action agenda. There was no public comment on that. The first item is E1, approval of plan to deny K-5 interdistrict transfers beginning fall of 2009. In order to move Santa Barbara Elementary District toward basic aid status, we will close to public comment at this time, so please turn in your speaker slips so that we can judge how much time we can give to people. And thank you. Mr. Herron, how many? Okay. Okay, so 2 minutes. All right, we have 11. So we will, when the time comes for public comment, we will be able to give speakers 2 minutes each. And with that, I'll turn it over to Dr. Sarvis.
Well, I would like to introduce this. I'll have Meg Jete speak to it in just a moment. Tonight, we do face one of those most difficult decisions. We have students who are attending all 10 of our elementary schools, the non-charter schools, from other communities outside of the Santa Barbara Elementary District. We must decide, whether to continue those inter-district transfers, whether to deny those inter-district transfers or cut it somewhere in the middle. If we do not, we may be forced to cut services, and of course this is more than simply a decision about dollars and cents. This is a decision about kids, about their families, and about their schools. The Board of Education has discussed basic aid at its last meeting and the previous meeting. We've taken a look at projections in the past. Those projections have changed tremendously, and yet again, because of the changing budget picture, which we now have some finality about, although, let's see, Mr. Smith, did you say that there might still be changes to the state budget with the May revise?
Yeah, I'm not optimistic that those changes would increase the revenue limit. I think they might decrease the revenue limit,
Okay.
which would drive you closer or further into basic aid, depending on the scenario.
Well, the latest projections on becoming a basic aid district requested by the board at our last meeting are based on the latest information we have on the state budget process and updated ADA data. The elementary district is, of course, facing serious budget reductions based on the report that you just heard, based on the state budget, and will need to cut services later this spring. How deeply we cut will in part depend on the kinds of decisions we make tonight. And of course, cutting services to all students in the elementary district is more than just a decision about dollars and cents. It's a decision that will affect kids, will affect families, and will affect schools. Denying inter-district transfers in the future would set the course for moving the district into basic aid, as well as producing significant cost savings, which would mitigate budget reductions projected in April. I'd like Meg Jeté, our Director of Fiscal Services, to show you the what you have in your agenda, which is the current projections based upon the information we got from the state just this last week.
Thank you. I'd like to start off by pointing out that some of our numbers have changed due to the governor's budget, but also our projections, because we do project our ADA in this scenario in 910 for April 15th, 2010. 2010. So there was a decrease in the ADA of about 44 kids. I'm in column A. Well, I think we should go through this, but. In column A, we have 4,439.52 ADA times the base revenue limit, which is 61,4272, and that gives us about 27 million in revenue limit. We then deficit it and get to a $23 million in revenue limit. Do you have the little pointer, Davis? And we have some miscellaneous. Where is it?
It's underneath, on the underneath side.
Oh, okay, I see. So we have 23 million right here in deficited revenue limit, and then a miscellaneous transfers out, and our total revenue limit is 23,566,766, and then our property taxes are 22,713,509, which leaves us in revenue limit, being a revenue limit district of about 853,000. This is if no transfers and we nail our projections and we have a 2% property tax increase. As we move on to column B, we have less all inter-district transfers, including children of inter-district employees, which is 258. This is not accepting any more kindergartners, just releasing the students that are here in the school now. We follow the same scenario, and this is the 13% deficit that the governor has kept in his budget. And we come down and we're at $524,000 in basic aid at that point. Take the same scenario with the 6th graders, siblings, children of district employees, comes to 181. Follow it down, we're 112,000 or 113,000 into basic aid. We also did, this is 10-11, and if all of our projections are accurate, 10-11, we should be in basic aid status by about $500,000. Under scenario C, thank you. The numbers down at the bottom represent the staffing the cost savings in staffing that we would have. Just because we lost 44 kids in our projection, we're anticipating 2.2 FTEs. The 928 represents almost 13 FTEs, and the 651 represents 9 FTEs. So with that scenario, if we release 181 inter-district transfers for 910, we will barely be in basic aid if all our projections, all our assumptions are accurate. Are there any questions?
Good.
There were also a second scenario of the 5th and 6th.
Do you have another sheet? Because various board members had talked to me about various options. Let me just point out on this one, though, that moving into basic aid, this number, the the $100,000 here is additional revenue to us. Now, that would increase the following year, and it would increase significantly the following year. But the money that comes to the district as a result of this is not really based upon the increase in revenue, because this is a very small increase this next year. The cost savings is the significant thing for the district, and if we were to do nothing, we would still have $158,000 in cost savings. The difference between this and this, when you add that to the revenue, is some $600,000. Now, that to me says that this is $600,000 we will not need to make in budget cuts this spring. And I think that's a significant number. There are some other scenarios. Did you have another sheet?
Well, I do have the 5th and 6th grade siblings, children of district employees, and that comes to 122, but it does not bring us into basic aid. We're only about 200,000 into revenue limit. And another point I wanted to make, and we keep talking about how big our reserve is, that's on a combined basis, but if you look at the elementary, we barely make our 3% reserve. And by us going into basic aid and cutting the cost, we secure, or we will have a greater attempt to secure that 3% reserve.
I just wanted to add something. It kind of ties into both the prior presentation and also this presentation. And I might have said this before, it's a lot easier to get economies of scale through expenditure reductions in the secondary district just because the larger student population, the higher revenue limit, more FTEs. So that's when we start putting together a cut list. We can always get there in the secondary district just because of those factors. It's very difficult to find any kind of single item expenditure reductions that have an order of magnitude in the elementary that are significant. And that's what Meg was really talking about. We struggle to meet our 3% requirement in the elementary if we stood alone. In the secondary, that's where the majority of our reserve is, but we report combined under Ed Code 35110. So when we talk about having an 8% reserve or 7% reserve, it's both of those reserves combined.
Thank you. Board members, would you like to ask questions now? Would you like to hear public comment first? Mrs. Deacon?
I have a couple quick questions while the chart is still up. I believe you addressed this last time, but could you please tell us what the miscellaneous category is? And also in column C where it says transfers except 6th graders, siblings, and children of district employees, is that siblings forever or siblings for 1 year?
That's siblings for 1 year. The miscellaneous is a few things. It's a PERS reduction, which is a very complicated calculation, and also our transfer to the county office for some of our special education kids that they have.
All right, Mr. Herron?
Now, this number of 112,991 is dramatically different than 2 weeks ago and dramatically different than 4 weeks ago. We've gone from 1,000,002 or 3 down to 112,000 in 4 weeks. What's going to happen in the next 4 weeks?
Well, for one of the reasons why it did go, the $113,000 from $1 million was if you put in the deficit that they were expecting, the 16% deficit on this scenario, it would drop like $1 million. It would go $1 million into basic aid. That's how much the deficit has effect on that $27 million up at the top.
Okay.
And you remember in the original proposal, we stood to lose $6.1 million over both districts over 17 months, and now we're losing $2.8 million in the revenue limit. So that's the difference.
And my point was really that at $1 million, it was a much easier decision. At 112,000, it becomes less of a, and all of that 112,000 is presumed to be the 2% property increase covers more than that 112,000. So if property taxes don't go up 2%, that number doesn't come to fruition either.
And if our projections in ADA come in at different amount, the deficit could change.
Okay.
I mean, there's a lot of variables.
Yeah.
There's always
And so the cost savings per scenario in column C of 651,000, I mean, that's teachers. And the presumption is we can do with less teachers. It always seems to be the first line of defense is cut teachers. How many teachers? That's 9 teachers. If we don't do anything, we lose 2 teachers. How many additional teachers is anybody projecting because of the situation in cuts? How many total teachers are we projecting that might be influenced in this process by March 15th?
Well, I think one of the issues, and it's not germane just to this, is that basically we have to overnotice to protect our flexibility. I'm sorry. One of the issues that's not particularly germane to just the basic aid discussion is that we will have to overnotice teachers, because if we're going to avail ourselves of any of the flexibility provisions, specifically the K3 CSR flexibility, you can't box yourself in. You'd have to notice prior to March 15th if the board decided they wanted to do something like that. And as I pointed out, it's very difficult to find cuts that are significant in magnitude in the elementary district. So obviously this would be one. That potentially could be one. There might be some others.
Is the number of teachers projected to receive notices in the over number any different in the 2 scenarios? Either we do this or we don't do this. Is the number of teachers notices going out, and follow up on that, are the teachers the same? And are we going to send out the same number of notices to the same teachers regardless of what we do on this topic?
Well, let me answer that.
Yeah, that's tough.
Essentially, yes, we will send out the same number of notices. If the board adopts this and it brings $600,000 to our budget, we will probably still need to increase class size. We may only need to increase class size by 1 student or 2 students, maybe 3 students. I don't know. That will be a board decision at the time. And the decision will really be where we ended up with this, how much we do need to increase class size, how much of the reserve we can burn down, because adopting this would put us in a holding pattern for the following year, and we could use one-time reserve for that. If we return to all students, this would move us 1.3 million. If you take these 2 numbers and you subtract this number, that would move us $1.3 million to the positive in our budget. We would probably not have to implement any class size reduction. And if we picked some point in between the B column and the C column, where we only had some 40 students, halfway between the 181 to 258, we'd be helping our budget to the tune of some $900,000. I mean, if there's some way that you can meaningfully add to this recommendation and help us, it will help our budget cuts significantly.
Any other comments? I just want to chime in here that this was one of the things that was most interesting to me, was seeing that as the numbers changed because the deficit factor changed, how much is saved simply by having fewer students and not necessarily around basic aid or not basic aid. And I think that our district has always just sort of accepted interdistrict transfers rather willy-nilly rather than being strategic about placement and whether there's an open and existing class. And that was really enlightening to me to see that is an issue. Even taking out the basic aid factor, that there are costs around taking interdistrict transfers, and that's something that Ed Code specifically delineates as sort of a cut and dried line. If it's going to cost you more to transfer, to accept an interdistrict transfer, then there is no need for a district to do that. All right. Dr. Noel?
Every time I see the children of district employees on here, I assume there's a line of reasoning behind that, but I've never heard it.
I'm happy to chime in on that. And one of the reasons for me that I'm interested in that is that I know that every basic aid district around us offers that as an employee incentive. And we are already lower in salaries than our surrounding districts for the most part. And so I would be concerned if we had yet another differential. If you go to the Goleta district, you're going to get paid more, you're going to have a smaller class size, and your child can go there, but it's nothing is on the table for Santa Barbara elementary and secondary teachers. So that's something that I was thinking about.
Well, it treats the district as the unique employer of all employers in the community. And I just had not heard that rationale. I understand what you say.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure I agree with it, but I understand it.
Yes. All right, well, with that, let's move on to public comment. All right, we have closed to public comment at this point. Mr. Herron?
I'll go through the names, and I'll call 3 names if you can be ready to go. And we are limited to 2 minutes. If you've spoken in the past, anything you can do to help us, it's awful hard to sit here and cut people off. So if you can sort of wind down at the 2-minute, we'll work with you as best we can. But if I see that you're going to be going on and on and on, I will have to cut you off. But be lenient on me, because it's hard for me to tell you to stop. So we'd appreciate it. Debbie Beltran, followed by Elaine McCaba, followed by Shannon McCain Jaffe. And in a lot of cases, we have received communication from many of you, and so we have in depth heard your comments.
Good evening. My name is Debbie Beltran, and my son attends Santa Barbara Community Academy. I come before you out of concern for my son's education. It is my understanding that the Santa Barbara School District is planning to revoke all inter-district transfers for the school year 2009-2010. I also understand that the funding for schools is currently suffering its own statewide economic crisis and is making every effort to keep itself funded. By switching to a more lucrative funding system, this has caused many parents to suffer the panic of not being able to have their children attend a school they have attended for so many years. In 2006, I chose to enter my son in school in Santa Barbara since I work here full-time and have done so since 1994. By chance, I discovered Santa Barbara Community Academy, and my son was accepted for enrollment. My son is thriving and continues to thrive at this school, and I feel that removing him from this school would damage his effective domain. With this understanding, I would like to propose that all children who are currently enrolled in a school within the Santa Barbara School District and utilizing the inter-district transfer process be grandfathered in and allow their continued education as they make their way through the grades. I feel very strongly that consistency for school-age children is critical for their emotional well-being and continuous learning. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Beltran. Elaine McCaba, followed by Shannon Jaffe, followed by Renee Takada.
Okay, my name's Elaine McCaba. I think you guys received 2 emails from me. You understand how difficult it is for me to get around. This is my first time out of the house since I broke my leg. It's really important to me, and I am a in-district parent. I initially thought that we would, when I first talked to Kate Parker about basic aid, that we would be starting it with kids coming in, not kicking all the kids out. I know the particular school I go to, Open Alternative, when the question was asked how many teachers would be leaving, would they be the same? If this is passed, I don't think they will be the same. They will mostly come from my school because our enrollment is a third outside of the district, and it's not just Goleta. Most of it, I think, is in the Hope District. This is a school that has existed for 30 years. It's had no boundaries for 30 years. It's a very unique school, and it can't be replicated quickly at any other district. I left Santa Barbara Charter because it wasn't a good school, and that's the closest thing you can come to OAS. I'm just asking that you guys consider retaining the kids who are there, cutting it off here, saying nobody else can come in, and let them matriculate, and then your cost savings should arrive quicker than you think, because there will be families that will leave because they have incoming siblings. It will have that effect. I know that. And that's just, again, I'm just asking that. Teresa gave this great presentation about bullying. My daughter attends LaCoombe Junior High right now. She's coming from OAS and charter. She made huge progress at OAS over charter. She's a GATE student. She gets straight A's. The amazing thing to them was all the charter students, or I mean the OAS students, was that they had to write these essays about hate and treating people nice because they grew up in a culture of respect, and that's just what you do. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Shannon Jaffe, followed by Renee Takada, followed by Lani Takada.
Hi,
Takeda.
Shannon Jaffe. So my children go to the Open Alternative School, and they've been going there for 5-6 years. And the schools most affected by this decision are the Open Alternative School and Adams. 15 to 20% of Adams students commute from Lompoc and Santa Maria, so this would create a hardship for those families and especially for the children. 30% of OAS kids are inter-district transfers. Again, a significant hardship for those families who commute from Carpinteria, like myself, in order to serve our community here. I'm a teacher here in Santa Barbara, so it's really important that my children, go to school here in Santa Barbara. Although I realize the hardships, the dilemma of the budget, I'm just asking that you consider to allow a more natural, organic process for the children, the families who are already enrolled, and so stopping new transfers at kindergarten and allowing the current families to continue on, especially at the Open Alternative School, is so important. So please consider this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Renee, followed by Lani, followed by Mr. Sanchez. Rennie?
Yeah, Rennie.
Rennie, I'm
Thank
sorry.
you. That's okay.
Turned around. I'm Rennie, and I'm an OAS student that lives in the district. If this goes through, I'm losing half of my friends and half of my class. Where am I? We're losing a third of our students. We have 210 students at our school. We're losing 70 kids. Most of them I've known since kindergarten. It's not just about losing friends, but it's going to change our school.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
I second everybody's, including the Community Academy, comment. Just that all schools are special in their own way. So, not to say our school is great and we shouldn't lose our school, but we shouldn't do this to any kids in any schools. They should all be grandfathered in, is how I feel. And but on these smaller schools that have fought hard to offer kids different things, different kind of learners, like I was one of those. I didn't do well in my regular elementary school, and I wish that there were alternatives. So for a lot of these families, they've sought out special schools for their children to be successful and, build their character and feel good about themselves. And so to me, preserving those schools that have really focused on filling in those areas for those different learners is really important, extra important, I think. So to allow all those children that are there to be grandfathered in would be, the alternative I would hope that you would consider. And I guess that's what I have to say. I also think, though, that these small schools will fall apart without those students because we're already struggling to meet our goals, PE teachers or arts. We're already struggling to meet the money, to get the money for all those programs, and without that many, that many students leaving, it'll make it way harder. So I don't even know if the schools will survive on that small of a student body. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Sanchez, followed by Mr. Tonkin, followed by Ms. Bobrow.
Buenas noches, mi nombre es Roberto Sánchez y la razón por la que estoy aquí es para expresar también mi necesidad de poder mantener a mi hija y a mi hijo en las escuelas de Santa Bárbara. Mi hijo ahora está en la San Marcos High School, estudió aquí en la Santa Bárbara Academy, está aquí desde el 3er año. Mi niña está desde aquí, desde el kindergarten. Yo quiero que me ayuden porque es la única forma que puedo de tener aquí a mi hija. No tenemos familia en Ventura para que nos cuide a mi hija. Yo ahorita estoy un poco nervioso porque también oigo a tantas personas que tienen la misma necesidad que yo. Y la razón es para que también me ayuden a mantener a mi hija.
Yeah, I would like you to allow me to keep my daughter here in Santa Barbara.
Quiero que ella siga aquí.
I would like her to
No
continue to
solamente
be
ella,
here, not just her,
No solamente ella, sino
not
muchos
just her, but
padres
there are a lot of parents here
la
that have
necesidad de trabajar
the need to work
para sacar a nuestros hijos adelante. Yo lo hago
so we can
porque
raise our children.
no veo
The
a
reason
los
why I'm
padres
doing
que-
this because
que
I don't
invité
see the
hoy
parents
de
that
la
I invited
academia
here
que
that
hablan
go to the
español.
academy that speak
No veo a
Spanish.
ninguno.
I don't see any of those
Yo lo hago
parents
en
here,
nombre de ellos porque-
but I'm doing it on their
porque yo sé
behalf
que ellos también se van,
because I know that they
porque
also go.
el meeting termina tarde.
I know that the meeting ends late.
Mi niño ahorita estaba haciendo la tarea en el carro.
I know my son was just doing his
ahorita ya está
homework in the
durmiendo,
car. He's probably asleep in the car at this time.
Pero, por favor, tomen en
I would like
cuenta
you to please keep in
solamente
mind
mi
that
necesidad, sino
not just my
también la de
needs,
todos
but the
los
needs
padres
of
que
all the
expresan
parents
lo mismo que yo,
that feel the
que
same way I
sigamos
do.
trayendo a nuestros hijos.
And we would like to continue to bring our children
ya-
here.
Thank you,
mi
Mr.
hija.
And my
Por
daughter,
favor,
please,
ayúdennos.
please help them.
Thank you very much. Mr. Tonkin, followed by Ms. Bobrow, followed by Arjun Sakar.
Nick Tonkin, I'm an OAS parent. I reside within the district. Members of the board, tonight your staff is asking you to do something that is flat out wrong. It's against the mission statement you have on the wall behind you. It's something that would tear apart families, as you've just seen, communities that have been formed in the schools that we have here in our town, would jeopardize not just our families' rights to freedom of choice in education as enshrined in the California Education Code, but also jeopardize, in some cases, the very welfare of the children. You do not have to do this. You should not do it, and instead, you should provide the leadership that you promised us when we elected you to care for our most precious treasure, our children. You should and can and should postpone any decision on this action for a year, given the uncertainty that was just discussed. You have the ability to do this. You have reserves that could cover it. You have temporary cuts you could and are anyway going to make to programs. And in the meantime, you can use the time to provide the leadership that we need to find real solutions to these problems. This would most likely include a regional unification of our elementary schools.
30
I'm,
seconds.
I'm not aware of the exact amount, but I'm sure there would be millions of dollars saved in eliminating as many as 6 superintendents and administrations from our local area. The failure of the previous boards to act in this manner and really be leaders is what has brought you to this Hobson's choice that you now feel bound to make. But you do not have to make it. You can and should postpone this decision, put it off for a year until the budget situation clears, and you can find out what the solutions are to this problem.
Thank you, Mr.
We will
Tonkin.
work with you to do that.
Thank
but
you.
we need you to lead us.
Virginia, followed by Mr. Sakar, followed by Anna Rodriguez.
I have someone speaking for me because I have
thank you to those board members who promptly replied to my email this morning. I have 2 further comments to make. I have a Santa Barbara address and 93105 zip code. I voted for some of you board members in the election last fall. However, my property taxes go to the Goleta Union School District. Therefore, my children are inter-district transfers and will be affected by your proposed policy to deny inter-district transfers, either directly or indirectly. You have welcomed these children into your schools, and they have brought additional revenue into your district. Now you are turning them away when it doesn't suit your needs. That seems the height of unfairness and ingratitude. You can be assured that your vote here tonight will affect your reelection. Please vote down this proposal to deny transfers. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Mr. Sakar, Anna Rodriguez, followed by Michael Lazarevic. Hi, Michael.
Thank you, board members, for allowing me to talk. And again, thank you for replying my email so promptly as well. The 2 questions that I had asked to be said publicly for the vote, before your vote, was basically in column A, what we don't see is what is the projected time frame when the district will become basic aid in natural matriculation. So basically, when will the district, with nothing done, not by budget, but by time, when will it become? And I'd like everybody to hear that tonight. And this is from data that I'm sure that you have. The other thing is, in the data that you have, with the projections of these other categories, B and C, how many students and families do you assume will move into the district? Because myself, I'm not just talking about OAS families. I've heard at least 10 families that plan on moving into the district to go to the schools they want to. So these boundaries and decisions that families are going to be made are for more than just the reason. So a homeowner somewhere else outside, you get my drift, is going to be moving into the district anyway. So the numbers need to reflect that, and I'm sure. And I would like that just answered real quick. And the last one, if we can include, if this motion does move forward, I think that you should allow like grandparents that have the houses where they've been raised, that are in the district, to include, like other basic aid districts include the grandfathers, grandmothers that own the houses. Are we going to include sisters and brothers that don't have kids and they're paying property tax be included? Obviously, the electric bill or water bill can be put into their brother, sister's child's name. I mean, this is just kind of obvious a thing. So I just want to make sure that that is put into your factors, how many people are going to be moving into the district as well. And if you can answer those before you take that vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Anna Rodriguez, followed by Michael, followed by Christy Grant.
Hi. I have worked in Santa Barbara since shortly after I graduated in 1999. I have a first and a second grader at Santa Barbara Community Academy. And my issue is the same as Mr. Sanchez. I live in Ventura because that's the only place I could afford to buy a home. But I work here a block away, and my husband works in Goleta. Childcare is a huge issue. And so this transfer not only would affect my kids, because they really don't want to go, because when we moved to Ventura, it was made an option to them, hey, how about we try over here with our friends who we have over here, you go to school with them. They're like, no, I want to go to community academy, I want to go with my teachers, I want to see, all my friends that I've gone to school with since we were in kindergarten. Our employers, just to help us out with childcare and everything, have worked with our schedules. My husband starts at 6 in the morning, gets off at 3, picks up the kids from the bus stop right behind over here in the corner, and he takes them home, and I'm the one who brings them to school and takes care of everything else. Their doctors are here in Santa Barbara, their extracurricular activities are here in Santa Barbara, so that would make it really difficult for us. And granted, the way the economy is, it's not as easy for me or my husband just to pick up and say, you know what, let me go find a job in Ventura that's going to pay me what I need to make in order to make my mortgage payment. So I would really, really, really like for you guys to consider that whole grandfathering in thing, because it would make it extremely difficult, not just for my children's emotional standpoint and educational standpoint, but from a lot of us parents who commute, financial standpoint. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Michael, followed by Christy Grant, followed by Nancy Black.
Thank you. I understand the position that you're put in, and if I was in your position, I would vote, but I'm not in your position. I'm in my position. My position is this. I'm in the position of telling my 9-year-old daughter, who attends the community academy, that she can no longer see her friends that she has known for 5 years. She can no longer see the teachers that she has known for 5 years. And she can no longer attend the school that has become her family that she has known for 5 years. I am in the position to watch my daughter's educational well-being and emotional well-being be severely impacted by this decision. And my position is the worst position a parent can be put in, because it is no longer, it's not just an awful position for a parent, it is a position of helplessness. And when a parent feels helpless, they can't do anything, and they see what's happening to their child, and they can't do anything about it. It's the worst position any parent can be put in. I understand your position. I just wanted you to understand mine. Thank you.
Thank you. Christy Grant, followed by Nancy Black.
Hi, thank you, board members, for listening to our comments. I emailed some of you, and I just wanted to reiterate a couple things that I commented in that email. I have 3 daughters, one who has graduated from the Washington Gate program, one who's currently in the Washington Gate program, and one who's in 2nd grade and has taken the GATE test last week. This program fits a very unique population of students. It was developed years ago, and it's thriving. And the students do wonderful in it. It's 30 hours of GATE education a week. If we were not allowed to transfer into the district, my daughter would get 1 pull-out hour a week of GATE education. And I just feel like there's no program like this anywhere else in the county, and I hope that you will consider allowing us to continue in this program that really meets the needs of these special children. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Nancy Black.
Hi, my name is Nancy Black. I'm in Open Alternative School, and my kids are in district. A group of OAS parents had the opportunity to meet with the superintendent of Goleta and a team of her officers to discuss this very issue. Together, we discussed an interesting idea that I'd like to propose here, that of inter-district student swapping straight across without involving finances, just a straight student swap. The superintendent was open to this idea. She said, you know, the risk would be that if the other district enrollment drops, then you'll get pulled. Is that clear? Did I make myself, like if you have a straight swap, 5 from over here and 5 from over there, and these ones go and those ones go, and then 3 of these drop out, well, then 3 of these ones have to be pulled. And that's what the superintendent saw as the risk. And Virginia was there, and she said, well, that's basically the same risk we face right now, because every year we face the possibility that our contract will not be renewed the following year. So it's no real risk. And it just seems like a possible solution to these 300 families, these 300 kids who are interdistrict transfers, who are very devoted to their schools. What if we could work out a solution with our neighboring districts that's not about the money, but it's about straight across kid swap? I just proposed that as an idea, and I want you to know that we're all here to help work out any details, anything that we can do to support you with this. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And since that just did get brought up, that was discussed at the last meeting, and I know that you've been talking with superintendents. So Dr. Sarvis, do you want to
I did approach the other superintendents in the immediate area about a one-on-one swap, one-for-one swap. They made it clear that for our students attending their district, that it would have to be on a random basis, a lottery basis, and that they could not assure the location at a certain school, but that they would be willing to entertain the notion. They asked that we take a look then at models elsewhere in the state. I believe there are other school districts with it. Well, in fact, we've seen other school districts with MOUs because they're basic aid districts and have a memorandum of understanding with another district to service their children. So they're open to that suggestion, and I believe we would follow up on that suggestion.
And a recommendation would be also for parents to visit the school boards or try to meet with board members from their home districts for having a discussion around that as well. Yes?
Certainly.
Okay, board members, Dr. Noel?
Yes, a point of personal privilege, I guess it is. I had a lot of difficulty understanding the translating process that went on. For me, it was confusing, and I couldn't see the face of the translator. I wonder if I could hear a summary of the gentleman's comments to the board.
Would you be willing to?
Well, simultaneous translation is very hard when you hear both voices.
Now, Dr. Noel would just like a summary of.
Just a summary.
And not simultaneous, so that you're not
Yes.
talking over each other.
Sequential, please.
Sí, mi niño, desde que está aquí en tercer año, él ha estudiado aquí en la Santa Bárbara Community Academy.
Okay, permítame, pause. So yeah, my son's been here at the community, at the academy since he was in 3rd grade,
Y ahora está en la San Marcos.
and he's now attending San Marcos.
Tengo a mi niña que está aquí estudiando desde el kindergarten.
And I also have my daughter who's been here since kindergarten, and I know that previously he said that he commutes from Ventura. And
Yo la razón que por la que estoy aquí con ustedes
yeah, and the reason why I came here before you
es para manifestar también todos los derechos que tenemos como padres
because I wanted to express my rights and the rights of those other parents,
para que nuestros hijos estén en las escuelas de Santa Bárbara.
so that our children can continue to attend the Santa Barbara schools.
Yo sé que ahorita voy a llegar tarde a mi casa, tal vez 9:30.
Yeah, I know I'll be home late, maybe 9:30, but
Y mañana tengo que darme temprano otra vez a las 6 de la mañana
yeah, and I'll be up early again at 6 a.m.
para estar aquí de
tomorrow.
nuevo con mis hijos en la escuela y empezar mi día trabajando, porque también trabajo con mi esposa, trabajamos juntos.
Yeah, and I'll be bringing my children very early in the morning, to start my day off tomorrow, because I work here as well as my wife. We work together.
Y también se me olvidó decirles que después de escuela mi niña va al Georg Sing Club.
Oh, yeah, and I forgot to tell you that after school, my daughter attends Girls Inc. Club, the Girls Inc. Club here,
Y la recojo 5:30.
and I pick her up at 5:30.
Thank you very much.
Yo lo que pido es que pues nos den la oportunidad de que nuestros hijos, no solamente el mío, sino de todos los que pasamos ese podio hablar, para que nos den la oportunidad de que nuestros hijos
Yeah.
sigan.
And all I'm asking for is the opportunity for our children to attend school, not just my children, but everybody's children, that are here, so that they can continue to attend school here.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you, Madam President.
Board members, comments, questions? I know this is very difficult, but we do need to talk about it. Mr. Herron?
I have one question. I had asked Mr. Smith and Dr. Sarvis a question, and I got sort of a conflicting answer. And it was relationship to basic aid and something I read about backfill. And it basically says, well, basic aid districts will not be affected by the revenue limit, and will not be required to make additional category program cuts equal to the revenue limit deficits, basic aid districts will not be eligible for the federal stimulus revenue limit backfill. I don't know what that means, but Mr. Smith, you mentioned that you thought we were going to 2010, 2011 to get to basic aid, and Dr. Sarvis told me, no, we're trying to do it in 2009, 2010, and that was my understanding because I saw the yes in the bottom line. So do we know anything about this not being eligible for backfill if in fact we make basic aid in 29, 210?
I mean, I don't have particulars on that, but $600 million, I believe, of federal stimulus was co-opted by the governor in this last proposal. And my assumption is that that's backfilling K-12's or the state's obligation to fund K-12 at the state level. So I don't think it's a direct distribution down to this level. It's just basically meeting that obligation at the state level and thereby reducing the expense they have to make to local districts.
Okay. And is there an answer to the gentleman's question about column A? If we do nothing, how long will it take for that 853 to switch over to the other line?
I think Meg knows the answer to that. On the natural, when do we go into basic aid?
There we go. I did a quick calculation, and we're looking at 11-12. We go naturally. That's if ADA drops, property taxes continue at 2% increase, and the deficit remains the same.
Thank you.
I have several questions, but I'll bow
Wait.
to the
Okay. Mrs. Cordero? Oh, wait, Mrs. Deegan?
We've seen the very human face here tonight of what this would mean if we restricted transfers. I know we've talked a lot about what the trade-off is in terms of other budget cuts if we don't do this, but we don't really have a sense of what the human face of that is. And I know we've talked about how we likely would have to increase class size, and we've talked about numbers of teachers that would be laid off under these scenarios. Is there any way to give us an idea of the numbers of teachers we'd have to lay off if we kept our transfers and did not and increased class size?
Yeah, I think we have that data.
Do we have it now?
We can go get it.
Well, it's one of those, essentially, it would basically double the number of teachers that you'd have to lay off to get to the same number if you're simply doing it by increasing class size.
Well, and you wouldn't simply do it just by increasing class size, because you're not getting, if let's say you raise class sizes in K3, you're not going to get 100% of the savings because you're going to take that differential sliding scale revenue penalty. And so basically where you might, let's say if you go to 23-1, you might save 1.5 million in straight, FTE costs. It's only going to end up being about 780,000 because you're taking the revenue ding. And we've looked at that. We've started to do some analysis on that.
I can't give you a specific number, but if you take the first column where we do nothing, and that really brings us still $160,000 in savings based on our projections, we have a major increase in class size, and we'd probably have to go to 26, 27 students in every kindergarten through third grade class to get to the same point where if we went to column B and returned every inter-district transfer student, we would probably have no increase in class size. And the number of layoffs are roughly equivalent. If we go to column C, and that brings us, column B, again, brings us $1.3 million. We would probably figure that's it. We've done our duty in terms of the budget for the elementary district, and we don't need to consider any other cuts in the elementary district. If you go to column C, which is bringing us some $600,000, we probably are still looking at class size increases on the order of 22 or 23 students.
Mrs. Cordero?
Well, two things. One is that I would really like to see, Mr. Smith, you said we can get it. And I would love to have that information if we could, maybe get that in a couple of minutes. But I mean, I don't know how difficult that is to do. But if
I'm not sure we're ready to display the entire analysis, but we could tell you what the FTEs were.
Okay,
if
that would be great to
sufficient.
know. The other, I want to echo a little bit of what Mrs. Deacon said, which is, I appreciate, I can't remember which speaker it was who said, you know what you would do if you were.
It's Mr. Lazarovitz.
Yes, thank you. Because I feel similar. If I were not on the board, I know what I would be saying. Because when I wasn't on the board, I often was here saying it. But the luxury of not being on the board is that you kind of have the luxury of looking at it from one perspective. And unfortunately, when you are on the board, we have to look at it from a variety of perspectives, which has been extremely difficult for me and a number of issues that have come up, because it's very easy to focus on the students that are going to be affected. Could be the 181, the 258, however many we talk about, who are going to be affected if we make this change in the inter-district transfer policy. But we haven't really talked about the hundreds of students that will be affected if we don't make the change by the increase in class size, by the cuts that we have to make. And so it's very difficult to try to balance how we're going to be affecting one group of students with how we're going to be affecting another group of students. Because we certainly, I think all of us on the board, always hope that there's going to be a way we can accommodate the needs of all the students. And when we're in a position where we feel like whichever we do is going to have consequences for one group, then, and if we do this, it's going to have consequences for this group of students. If we don't do this, it's going to have consequences for this group of students. It puts us in a very difficult position, and I see that here, in the sense that, for me, this is not. I mean, we couch it in the words of basic aid, but it's not really about whether we're basic aid status or not. It's really about whether we have the funding to provide our students with the appropriate level of instruction that they need. And that's, I think, where what we're all grappling with. At least I can speak for myself, but I assume it's true for my colleagues as well. Looking at how do we give the greatest number of our students the educational experience that they need to have without doing too much harm to anybody else. So it's a very, very difficult position for us to be in.
Thank you. Dr. Noel?
Thank you, Madam President. And I appreciate the contributions that members of the public have made. I'm going to just touch a few points. One thing that's going down very hard for me, and it's a moral issue. Before this issue, the basic aid thing came up, we loved having additional ADA. It was money. And now that the basic aid thing has come up, we want to get rid of it. And I'm troubled by that, because there's more involved than money, as we all know. I'm concerned also, and I've expressed this before, about the impact on programs. I think that, and some people misunderstand, I'm not an OAS fan philosophically, okay? But it doesn't matter, because OAS philosophically contributes importantly to our community. And I think that diversity, that philosophic educational philosophy diversity, is very important, and that we need to offer that in our district. I am much more comfortable with the core knowledge philosophy, okay, at the Santa Barbara Community Academy. and indeed worked very hard to bring that about many, many years ago with Bob Pohl. And I believe that's terribly important to be available in our community. I think the GATE program at Washington is a very important program. I had a child go through it. I know a little bit about that program. And in each of these cases, there's a culture. And I think that that's very important, and it's delicate. I have become, in my experience and my research on educational issues, I've become a great believer of the importance in developing a nurturing kind of school culture. So I'm very concerned about that impact. Another thought, it just occurred to me listening tonight. We have not had a lot of participation by people who are poor, by families who are having a really tough time, by Latino families who work 2 or 3 jobs. We haven't, now, that's not surprising because they're probably working, or they're taking care of their families and have a hard time, and we know this, they have a hard time making meetings like this. And I appreciate this gentleman's comments because he's, I think, speaks for other people who are not here. And it raises the question of another kind of impact. Does this have differential impact on low socioeconomic status people? And I'm concerned about that. And I don't know the answer, but my suspicion is that it could, and I'm troubled by that. I get the sense when I look at these figures, these revised figures, they don't look as overwhelmingly attractive as the prior ones that Mr. Herron was pointing out. And the bottom line for me is that I'm just not prepared tonight to make a decision for scenario C or the what's the all scenario, for any of those scenarios. I think that for me, I need more information, and I need to be persuaded more of the urgency of doing this. Thank you, Madam President.
Yes, Dr. Noel, if you'll pass the papers down this way.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
I also very much appreciate all the parent comments that we've had tonight. We know that this is a very difficult decision within each family, and it's no place that board members ever like to be. For those of us that are sitting board members that have been on the board for a number of years now, we also know all too well, very unfortunately, what our Aprils have been like. And when we will get the families that are not here tonight, including our low-income families, our children that have special health needs, English learners, all of the in-district families and out-of-district families, that if we don't make a decision, will be affected in April by changes to by negative changes to the program. And we can say it's about money, but it's always about people, and it's about the students, and it is in both cases. So I also feel like we need to be careful not to get trapped in the idea of there might be more information or a change down the road. The budgets are dynamic. There is constantly new information and changes. And it can be worse instead of better, and in fact, that's actually the way I would expect it to go eventually. Board members, if you want to have further comments, Mr. Herron?
Yes. I guess fortunately, I haven't had the long-term experience that some of my colleagues have had, so I'm only governed by what I pledged in the campaign, which makes it hard for me, because my first main point was fiscal management. And I would like to compliment the news press on their basically 2 pages, and I don't know if Marcy's here or not, but basically 2 pages that if you read it, it's a no-brainer. You make the decision and you eliminate the inter-district transfers. As I've explained to Marcy and others, it's a great financial analysis. There's only 2 words in it that talk about the people. And they say there are human costs on both sides. Out of the entire document, 2 words about the human cost. And so my number one issue is fiscal management, and I have to look at these numbers very carefully. But in the process of getting to this position, I also said I want integrity in the process. I want dependability. I want consistency. I want honesty. I want trustworthiness. And probably most important, I said I believe that every child is an asset and not a liability. And all of a sudden, we have up to 258 students that are going to be looked at as liabilities to us. What I found interesting, another thing, is as of this moment in time, we only have 122 requests for interdistrict transfer. And what I also found interesting was that you really can't compare that number to last year, because last year we accepted interdistrict transfers all year long. So it seems to me that number one thing we can do is stop them immediately. And I don't know how many are going to come in the next 4 days or 3 days, or is it 2 days? I'm not sure, because they end on the 27th. And so, the cutoff for applications is the 27th.
I just want to chime in that it's actually the last cutoff is May 1st.
Well, on the website, it says the deadline is February 27th. So, as far as I'm concerned, unless somebody tells me differently, we could say after 5 o'clock on the 27th, no more. I don't know if we can do that or not, but that's what I would say. I'm not going to support Measure C, which is the superintendent's recommendation. And I'm not going to support it because it's a 77-person difference from B to C. And those 77 people are made up of 6th grades, siblings, and children of district employees. And I haven't had enough information from anybody that tells me that arbitrarily saying 6th graders deserve this more than anybody else. I could say, rather than grade level, let's just exempt Community Academy, OAS, and GATE and come up close to the same number. I could say, what about family ties to the district? Something like the grade level achieved by one student doesn't necessarily indicate the years of investment that a family may have made in their school. I could say employment in the district. What I find interesting is we have a policy that is totally separate from anything else that says district residency may also be granted to an elementary or junior high grade student not residing in the district if the student's parent legal guardian works within the district boundaries. That's a total separate category than the list of 11 exemptions for students. I don't know if this takes precedent over anything else. I find it interesting that it's separate and special and spelled out. So we have a lot of people who are employed elsewhere that have students here. There might be hardship cases. I could look at those 77 people and say, let's base it on some type of hardship. Obviously, we have teachers and we have siblings. I could come to that 77 much differently than just the 6th grade level. And so if it's based upon, if the motion is just based upon the number C, I will not be in favor of it. I wish we almost could go with level A and say, okay, tell us your hardship, tell us your reason, let us know what's on your mind, and we might have to make some decision at 40, 50, 60. Pardon? No, B is, yeah, okay, B, less everybody, but I found out we don't have a hardship policy. We don't have criteria for hardship. We would have to make that criteria. We would have to make that policy and decide, how we would look at various reasons why you all, tell us emphatically why you should be exempted. It's not an easy decision. I'm not willing to just arbitrarily say, okay, 6th graders, you've got it made. That's where I stand.
I do want to chime in here that through Ed Code, there would always be, and there currently exists, if an interdistrict transfer is denied, the right to appeal based on various hardship reasons, and it actually doesn't rest with our own board, the final decision, it rests with the county Board of Education. Mr. Herron?
The ed code, as I read it, says after all remedies at the district are done with, then you can go to the county board.
Right.
I don't see that we have, other than, I don't see where we have a procedure set out that would be the remedy from our district that you would appeal to the board.
Right, but it would be put into place. Mrs. Deacon and then Dr. Noel.
A couple of quick things. I actually like the idea of allowing sixth graders to stay. I think it gets harder as a child gets older to move, and I think that sixth graders have the need to graduate with their elementary school. So I would disagree a little bit that I don't think that there's a valid reason to make an exception for sixth graders. I also think that when we start talking about things that are more qualitative rather than quantitative in terms of exceptions, we get into some gray areas that might be very subjective and difficult to define. I know that parental involvement has been something that we've talked about as a group, and I know we've got a whole group of really involved parents here right now. But I guess my question would be, if we were to come up with a criteria like parental involvement, who would make that decision? I mean, would it be your principal? Principals at different schools may define involvement differently. How do income level and work obligations play into that? I think the ability of parents to contribute resources in support of their children's education, either time or money, can't really be a marker for allowing attendance, because then we get into some real equity issues. I also am really mindful of the parents that are not here tonight. We've talked about low-income families, but in reality, we've got a lot of low-income families in our district. I don't know if they realize the effect that the cuts will have on them, and they're not here to speak their piece, but I think we have to advocate for them as well. So those are just a few of my thoughts.
Dr. Noel?
Another tack that I have in my notes and neglected to raise. We talk about cut now, cut people now, or cut budgets and affect people later. But we haven't had the budget debate. And we don't know, but that there may be budget cuts that we can make that don't impact students very much, or impact them in a way that spreads it around, spreads the pain. That debate hasn't been had. I've been generating a list, and it will come as no surprise to some people that my list includes cutting administrative costs. I haven't even heard anything like, well, I have heard, no. I want to, before I say that, I correct myself. So for me, we're looking at only one side of the equation. I need to understand better what we can cut that is not impacting our educational programs. And I believe that there's a lot of room for cuts. I visited a lot of schools in the last year, and there's one story I'm going to make it very quick. It's a small school. It's a charter school. It's in south central Los Angeles. It has about 90% poor Latino families. It sends most of them to college. And I asked the director, can you live on your ADA budget, or what's called the charter school block grant? I can live on the budget. I pay $500,000 a year rent. I pay 7% to an association that manages all the business. I outsource all special education at a very high cost per unit. I meet my reserves, and I have $800,000 cash in the bank, which then makes me say, okay, why can't we do that? Well, one of the things is, I believe, large bureaucracy. And I think we haven't begun to be imaginative about ways in which we can lower that overhead cost without affecting kids.
Board members?
Yeah, I just feel like there are some issues going around. First of all, I agree that there are segments of the population, probably from the transfer students as well as the in-district students, who are not represented here tonight. But I won't presume to assume that I know the socioeconomic level of the people who have spoken and the people who aren't here. I won't, suggest that a person's ethnicity will tell me something about their socioeconomic level. And so I'm assuming that likely we have a fairly broad cross-section of people who have spoken to this issue. Whether they're representative of the demographics of the districts they come from or our district here, who knows? I'm not going to try to guess that. But I do think that that if we wanted to have a broad cross-section, we would need to do a much more targeted and focused approach. I would argue that that would be something we should probably do for every topic we ever address, because the people that are in this room appear, some of them are familiar, so they are the same people, but certainly the cross-section looks very much like what we usually get at a board meeting. I think that's an issue that is important to me, but it's an issue that's important to me for every topic that we address, not only for this one. I do think that the issue of hardship should be something that we raise, and I was going to ask for that in whatever we ultimately adopt, that there be, well, assuming that we adopt some restrictions on inter-district transfer. If we don't, then we don't need the hardship issue. But if we were to adopt something that did restrict inter-district transfer, that there would be a category for hardship, because I do believe that for some people, it might be a very, very appreciated, I don't want to say convenience, because I think that trivializes how important it is to people, but something that's just a really great option. For other people, it could be practically their only option. So hardship, I think a hardship policy would be in order. I think that there are a number of options that we have, because if people don't like B and C, or, I mean, there's other possibilities of that too, I go back to the one-for-one trade. Unfortunately, to do that, I think we would have to adopt B and then say, okay, with the districts, if there's a trade, if there's somebody transferring in, we can let somebody in.
I'm sorry, why couldn't we do C and do that?
Well, I guess we could do C and do that if we were just doing it for 6th grade. Or, I'm sorry.
Oh, no.
I'm sorry. You're saying keep
You
C and then
keep
do it for the rest of the.
Exactly.
Okay.
It's not meant for 6th grade. It's meant for, essentially, it would be for K5.
Okay. That's
the idea of a student swap.
And I'd be all for that. If it's not affecting what we have, if it's not affecting the cuts or the programs that we're dealing with right now, I would say I'd be all for it. But my point is, it would require making a decision to restrict inter-district transfers now, and then relying on the other districts to engage in this process with us, and relying on the fact that some of our students want to transfer to those districts.
Okay.
I also think that we could do it if we didn't want to say that, if we wanted to say there's nothing special about 6th graders, we could simply say a number. We could say we're going to reduce the number of inter-district transfers to or by 181 or 100 or whatever number we think. I think that'd be a lot more problematic, because then we'd have to go practically student by student trying to figure out who gets to stay and who doesn't. And I see lots of problems with that. We could look at the number of years that the student has been in the district. So we could say students who have been in the district for 3 or more years can continue. Students who have been in the district fewer years than that will have their transfer rescinded. That's another way to do it. We could continue to hope that parents and others could put pressure on the other districts to reimburse our district for the cost of educating their students, which we had talked about before, but none of the other districts are interested in doing that because there's no real incentive for them to participate in that kind of a process. I think that, and I kind of agree with Ms. Parker, that if we've been at this long enough, we know that if we waited to make a decision until we have definitive budget numbers, we would never make a decision. There would be no decision we could ever make because we never have definitive budget numbers. We have the best numbers we can get. And the likelihood that things are going to get better goes against every projection that anybody is making at this time. So I don't think it's realistic. It makes people happy for us to be able to sit up here and say, we think it's going to get better and we won't make this decision because down the line, hopefully we won't have to do it. It makes you feel a lot better, but it's not at all realistic, and I don't think it's very responsible because it just delays the inevitable, makes things more painful, and in the process, we inflict pain on many other people as well. So I think we need to, get on with the process so that people can start making decisions about what they're going to do.
All right. Mr. Aaron?
A couple of things. I'd be very happy to make a decision that we make this effective for the 2010-2011 year. I'd be one of the comments was how do you, what about longevity or involvement with the district? And one of our neighboring districts says those families with the most consecutive years of attendance in the district by the student or siblings of the student will be given higher priority. So you can do it by length of time in the district. I don't want to see us use the word hardship because I don't think parents going to OAS or the community or even the GATE program at Washington, they're not doing it because of hardship. They're doing it because it is a powerful program for their students. And we have, with open arms, accepted interdistrict transfers for years. Many of the parents in their notes to us said, the principal promised me in many different ways, shapes, or form. I've had 2 principals tell me, yes, we did make that promise. Now, should they have made it? I'm sure they did it in awful good faith. And so I don't want to hold anything against any principal that said that because it's our decision and we're responsible. That principal was acting in their belief at that time, but we openly said, come on in, we want you. So I'm happy to say, cut it off for the 2010. I'm happy to say February 27th at 5 p.m., cut it off. And I would accept even Mrs. Cordero's suggestion that we take some number and try to figure out, be Solomon, who it is that stays. And is that hard? Sure, it's hard. The easy way is to say 6th graders. Now, I have to tell you, I had a doctor friend of mine on the church steps tell me he's treated an awful lot of kids who have had to transfer in the 6th grade or in the 5th grade, going into 6th or 6th going into 7th, and it's traumatic. So I understand the concept of 6th grader. I'm not saying it's a bad decision. I'm just saying I could come up with a lot of other ways to make that decision. So I don't want anybody to interpret that when I say 6th graders isn't a priority. It might be, but at this moment in time, it's not for me.
Mrs. Deacon.
Oh, I just wanted to say, since we sent Ms. Jete out to get us these numbers, and I think we wanted to hear a little bit about how, how we, if we don't make this decision, how many teachers we might have to lay off. I'd like to hear the response on that.
I can cover it. What this shows you is basically it's some simulations relative to the K3 CSR flexibility that we spoke earlier. And probably what I'd like to do is let's just look at the currently column, which is the first column. And what that shows you there is basically the current number of students in the K3 cohort. It shows you at the top we have 132 full-time equivalents there. It shows you that we get $1,071 per student, and it shows you the gross amount of dollars times those students. And then you can see below, you can see not only the total funded, but you can see an average salary with health and welfare. It's because basically it's a lower salary, because in this analysis, we would assume those that leave are the lowest. So one way to contrast this is that if you go over to column E, which would be raising K-3 class size to, let's say, 25-1, we know that there's a 20% penalty on revenue, and you only get the revenue on 20-1. You don't get the revenue on the additional 5. So what you're seeing there is basically the cost savings relative to staff attrition, but then you're also subtracting out the amount of revenue penalty, and you can see that the savings in that respect would be $780,124, but it's a loss of 33 FTEs because you can measure the 99 against the 132 in the top row.
So instead of losing 9 to 10 teachers in this scenario, you would lose 33.
That's correct.
I wanted to say, first of all, on the idea of sixth grade, I really do think sixth grade is a special class. And Mrs. Cordero raised the issue again that yes, you could make it so it's a number instead of a target, but then I think she very clearly pointed out all the pitfalls with that. The issue for me with waiting until 10, 11 instead of doing it for the 09-10 year is that these cuts won't wait. These 33 teachers won't wait. It's a difference of 23 FTEs that we're talking about, and that it's not, I say FTEs, but it's about people, and it's about what services the students have, and that would affect all the students. In fact, I'd have to say that if you have a student that's still in this district, you might be better off going to your home district if we're talking about this kind of class size increase. Because I don't see that going away in our surrounding districts. We've talked about this quite a bit, but I think it's time, if we're going to take some action, is there a motion that board members are willing to make? If
we're all leaping at the chance,
I
you can
know.
tell.
Well, according to our bylaws, the president can make a motion if that would make people more comfortable. And therefore, I will move that we deny interdistrict transfers beginning the fall of 2009 for all students except for sixth graders, their siblings who are currently enrolled, and children of district employees, which is option C.
Can I add a amendment to that?
Yes.
That we adopt a hardship policy.
That a hardship policy will be developed.
Will be
Yes.
developed, yes.
I'll accept that amendment.
I'll grudgingly second that.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Hey, how about discussion?
Further discussion?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why the word hardship? Why not just an exemption policy? Hardship, to me, eliminates all of OAS. 'Cause you cannot say that because they want their children to go there versus someplace else, that that's a hardship. That is a very philosophical decision for the best of the child. So the word hardship, to me, says, okay, let's take the one there's one couple in San Ynez or in Paradise or Trout Club where they'd have to take their child to San Ynez, come down to here to work, go back to San Ynez, get back to Paradise, adds 2 hours of additional time in their transfer. Those are hardships. But just simply going to OAS or GATE, I don't consider those hardships. I wish you wouldn't use the word hardship, and I'm still going to, regardless what you do, I will vote against it for the reasons I've stated.
Mrs. Cordero?
I just wanted to explain why I'm using the word hardship, and I would be happy to change the term, but I don't think I would want to change the meaning to fit your concern, Mr. Herron, because I do want to give special consideration to those families for whom it is a legitimate hardship for them to not be able to have their students in our district, because we know that in general, not restricting inter-district transfers at all is going to be unpleasant for any parent who wants to have their children in our district who isn't able to do that. So by nature of this proposal, we're saying we know that will be the consequence. I'm looking at those parents for whom it really constitutes a significant hardship to them to have to place their child someplace else. So that's the reason for that one.
And just a moment, Mr. Herron, I want to chime in that maybe, Mrs. Cordero, you'd be willing to accept an amendment that I would change it to simply saying we would then, next step would be to develop an appeal process, because I feel like this is a whole other conversation about what that would entail, and I would want every board member to be able to weigh in fully on that. And so my amendment would then say that, next step would be that the board would develop an appeals process. Mr. Herron?
Yeah, I just hope we all keep in mind that this is should not be aimed at families. The person who's going to be hurt by this are the children. And so that's not limited to the family hardship or family appeal. The child whose life is at stake.
So Mrs. Cordero, do you accept my amendment?
I'm a little bit concerned because children will be unsettled by this, no doubt. I'm hopeful that children won't be hurt by going to another public school. It will be, all of us are it's traumatic or unsettling when we have to change something that we're committed to and that we do. But academically, we would certainly hope that students are not being harmed by it, they're not being hurt by it. My concern is in terms of accepting your change in language, is that I really don't. I'm happy to have an appeal process. I think we should have an appeal process, but I also think that there should be a hardship exemption.
Well, the hardship exemption, I think, would always simply be part of the appeals process.
And that's okay with me, but I don't want to eliminate the notion of a hardship exemption.
I think that's kind of a separate discussion, but that's the way I think it would need to be, because you'd have to
there would have to be a
meet
process
in
by
the appeal way in order to address whether or not there was truly hardship. So, or for whatever reason that the board ended up deciding that it was legitimate for a student to remain in the district.
Right.
So,
Okay.
Do you accept the amendment then in that form?
Well,
understanding
how
that
are-
we will absolutely have a discussion around the way.
How are we stating it then?
So it reads as the board the district recommendation that's on the action agenda, and it's option C that's listed up there. So after children of school district employees, and as a next step, the board will develop an appeals process.
Okay, as long as we understand that includes a hardship provision. Okay, then yes, I will accept it.
All right. Any other discussion?
I guess I just want to say that I'm incredibly sympathetic to the families here, but you can't jump halfway across a chasm like the one that we're facing in terms of our deficit, and we're just making a really difficult choice here. But I think we have to think long term, because I do believe it's not going to get better. I think it's going to get worse. And I think we'll be back here again making more and more cuts that will affect people at every level, including our staff. So, I thought.
Okay. With that, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
No.
The motion carries 3-2. Mr. Herron?
Is a motion in order to cut off any applications as of 5 o'clock on the 27th, per the information on the website? That might have a tendency to narrow down this number.
Well, let me just say that that as a result of the board's vote, A couple of current policies will be brought back to you at the next meeting. Board Policy 5117 and AR 5117. They'll need to be revised and brought back to you. That'll be done by the next meeting. And my reason for saying that is that we cannot actually act on the inter-district transfers until those policies are in place. However, we will notify parents immediately. We will notify all of the applicants for inter-district transfer immediately of the board's decision. And we will also need to bring back, I believe, a clear residence policy, and of course we will put on the board agenda an appeals process.
But I still ask the question, if we made it very clear that
Yes,
anything
the
that comes
answer is
in
yes.
after 5 o'clock has a lesser chance of getting an exemption than anybody else, so, or in this appeal process.
I'm not
I
comfortable
see.
with
I thought
changing
it
the
was-
existing date. The existing date is early enrollment ends February 27th, and final enrollment ends on May 1st. And I don't think there's any way that we could notify families in time to say that this Friday, sorry, you thought you could turn it in on Monday, but really you can't. And that could affect something like a 6th grade family who just hasn't gotten their form back in yet. So I just want to be careful about that.
What's the reason for the February 27th date?
That's the early enrollment deadline. That's when well, maybe Ms. Sawatsky, you could address that.
Right, that's our first time that we meet as principals. We look at the number of intra-district transfers and inter-district transfers. We follow the priority list. We look at all the program improvement transfers. We get all of that in place so that we have a much better idea of the number of spaces we have left at our school, so that then during the next wave, we can fill those in. So it's kind of in 2 stages. It used to be all the way until August, right before school started, and we changed it just in December, I believe, or recently, to have that May date so that we can be doing planning much more, easily, and parents don't have to wait all summer long to know if their transfer's been accepted.
All right. Well, I'm sorry that was very hard, and I know that we have a lot of very unhappy people here. And with that, we will take a break. E2. And item E2 is the establishment of 2 separate parcel tax citizens oversight committees and selection of candidates for each committee. Dr. Sarvis?
Oh. Well, board members, at our last meeting, we decided to establish a committee. We extended the deadline for people to apply to be on the committee. Board members have a list of people who have applied to be on the committee. I will also remind you that at the last meeting, we also added another category, which is the Education Foundation. And I'm scrambling to look at my names. I was asked by a couple of board members to start us out with a list. And just as an example, if you were to look down the Taxpayer Association column, there are only 2 names shown there. So let me just suggest that Lanny Ebenstein and Alice Post would be likely appointees in that category. If you look down Senior Citizens, you'll see Elaine Gordon, who's both in the top and the bottom. Elaine Gordon, by the way, is with Parks and Recreations, working in their seniors program.
Okay, thank you.
And is a senior, but you don't have to be a senior to work with the Senior Citizens group. And we also have in the elementary district Frank Stevens, who's willing to serve. So I think the likely choice there would be Elaine Gordon.
Elaine Gordon for the measure.
The high school district,
in Mr.
and
H.
Frank Stevens in the elementary district. If you look down the column for business, there are 2 people. Lanny Ebenstein has already been taken by another category. Patsy Hicks is one. Doug Martin is another. And Rob Ramirez was also willing to serve in the elementary district committee. So I would advise you to pick Rob Ramirez in the elementary district and pick one of the 2 people, Patsy Hicks or Doug Martin, in the secondary district. And that really brings me to the next part of the Sudoku puzzle here.
Well, can we talk just briefly about
Yes.
I would like to sort of get this done column by column. So for business, for Patsy Hicks and Douglas Martin, obviously,
Okay.
we would move on. People will probably draw straws. Some will be on for 1 year, one for two, and so we would hope that these people would just be willing to rotate on if they don't come on the first time around. But if board members have, I'm sure you looked at the applications, any comments on simply sort of experience with the district or a business experience that might be useful? Mr. Herron was up first, and then Dr. Noel.
Well, I expressed my appreciation last meeting about Patsy Hicks. I think she was fantastic and my one exposure to her. But I've known Doug Martin for years and years and years. And so my choice would be Doug Martin as a business person.
Mhm. And Dr. Noel?
Well, I'm not comfortable with, since part of this is oversight, right? These committees?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not
yes.
comfortable with the superintendent going down and winnowing this list.
Well, the reason
He just, for example, glossed over someone named Pam Tanazzi, and I have.
that's because he has her circled. It's essentially we have just enough candidates to
What am I
fit
missing?
into the categories, and so she gets slotted over onto the parent and PTA. If you see what I'm
Well-
saying, some of these people are multiple.
Maybe I should speak to the elementary district because of those bottom names. You need all of those names in the elementary district, with the exception of Linda Sterling, who is a first grade teacher at Peabody. And while we say in our qualifications you may not be an employee of our district, I don't think that the board would choose to put an employee of one of the charter schools on.
As long as they're accepting
Either.
money, which they are, it would be
Yes.
inappropriate.
So some combination of Alice Post, Rob Ramirez, Lynn Rodriguez, Frank Stevens, and Pam Tanassi, I think is necessary, no matter how you cut those.
Right. So for the
I
element,
didn't, forgive me, Dr.
Yeah.
Sarvis, I didn't understand the circling of her name elsewhere. I
And-
was focused on that column.
so if we just want to finish up with the elementary district, there really is only one column where there's possible choices, and that is in the community member column, where you see that Dr. Sarvis has put dotted lines around 4 members. And I don't know, board members certainly, again, I want to thank every single person that put in an application, and my hope is that they would keep their application current so that they can just rotate in as we need people. But you can look at that point, you can look at things like minority representation, at gender, and really at how involved they are with schools. Mr. Herron?
I know Elvira Gomez de Tafoya. She serves on the Measure V Oversight Committee for City College for their bond issue. And I know she's very in tune to the process.
Mm-hmm. Any other board member comments on that? Mrs. Cordero?
Well, I had gone through and kind of made up who I thought, who I was going to suggest for each of these categories, and I did want to recommend Elvira Tafoya for the at-large, community at-large position.
All right. Any other comments on it? Well, with those 2 members making that recommendation, we essentially could take a vote at this moment on the elementary district makeup.
I just want to double check that I'm clear on the parent.
So for the existing recommendations, considering how everybody,
Go ahead.
how everybody has been slotted in, it would be Rob Ramirez for business, Frank Stevens for the Senior Citizens Group, Alice Post for Taxpayers Association.
And then the parent was the one
And
that
the parent is where we're missing.
Yeah,
We're missing
okay.
one, so that would still need to go out.
Go back out.
It would go back out to fill it. Parent and PTA, it would be Pam, is it Tanassi?
Yes.
Then Education Foundation, Lynn Rodriguez. And for community member, Elvira Gomez de Tafoya. Yes, Mrs.
Is
Deacon?
that only 6 people and there are 7 on the committee?
Right, so what we're
Yeah,
missing is
we're
the
missing the
parent
parent.
slot, and that would have to reopen because every,
Got it.
the person, the people that filled that slot have been taken up by other categories.
Right, okay.
So is there a motion to accept the 6 of, okay, public comment on the Elementary District Parcel Tax Committee? If you want to make a general comment on it, sure.
David Holmes.
Do we have any other public comment on this item?
No.
Good evening. I'm David Holmes. I'm the Performing Arts Department Chair of San Marcos High School. Also past co-chair for the district Performing Arts back when we had a curriculum council that gave input to district staff on decisions having to do with curriculum. You have before you this oversight committee, and I understand the reason why you wouldn't want to have a teacher on the oversight committee because they're there probably lobbying for some of these funds. But I have to make it a real strong point that your teachers are the ones that have the expertise in regards to the arts, and the bond measures were passed largely using the arts as a way to get people really interested, because over the past few years we've lost significantly in our district in arts offerings, and maybe through this parcel tax, maybe we can gain back something incredible like the 7-period day at the junior highs that allows so much flexibility. I want to make a quick point that the Theater Fest 2009 that Barbara Kiani put together is fast upon us, and the point I want to make is this. These are exceptional programs, absolutely exceptional programs. Pirates of Penzance is headed by a certificated teacher named Heather Marshall. Annie, that's at Santa Barbara Junior High. Annie at Dos Pueblos, a certificated teacher. Clark Sayers in charge of that program. At La Colina, Oliver. Shannon Sala, certificated teacher in charge of that. Copacabana at La Cumbra Junior High, certificated teachers Katie Pell in charge of that. Goleta Valley Junior High, Pirates of Penzance, Carolyn Ross. Footloose at Santa Barbara High, Otto Lehman. Man of La Mancha at San Marcos High School, myself. Certificated staff members. And these extra monies that may be available through the parcel tax can go a long way in supporting these programs. The double-edged sword that the board faces, of course, is budget cuts that you've already talked about, and the layoffs that are coming, and the number of teachers who may get a RIF notice.
Mr. Holmes, I just want to be sure that this is about the Oversight Committee.
Yes, I'm going to tie it all together, I promise.
Okay.
All of these teachers, all of these programs that are so significant are headed up by teachers. The teacher voice has to be included by the Oversight Committee. The Oversight Committee, once it's selected...
You're out of time, David.
I want to make sure that the teacher voice is heard and has access. That's all.
Thank you.
Can I make one comment to David?
Yes.
You did a great job of getting your public comments into the thing. But I also want to say, earlier you heard that 2 of his students won speech contests. And David was the coach, and he's the teacher that got those 6 students, and I think many in the classroom, to try out for that. He's the one that was there promoting the students and promoting this speech ability, which is, fear is the #1 thing in the world, the fear of talking. So thank you very much.
Thank you. And
Well, I'd like to just
address
comment,
that, Dr.
while
Sarvis.
we're very appreciative of our teachers as teachers and our teachers' work in getting these initiatives passed, we're constrained by Proposition 39 language, which does not permit employees to serve on these
Right.
committees.
However, teachers are working with their principals in terms of how they would like the money to be spent. So
Yes.
the sites are going to be making the proposals to the district will present the plan to the Citizens Oversight Committee. Teachers can't be on that oversight committee, but they will have a voice in what the plan looks like.
And those committee meetings are open to the public as well, so teachers could attend
Yes,
those as well.
absolutely. Absolutely. So, Mrs. Cordero?
I don't want to cut off discussion. I was just going to move to constitute the elementary district as we had described.
Missing the one parent. that's
Missing
still
the one
being
parent
searched
position.
for. Is there a second?
Second.
Mrs. Deacon?
Oh, just to briefly discuss, I just wanted to also say that I'm glad that we've got some other great names here in the community member category. The Tom Oswald has a great science background, and Victoria Oswald music, and Gwen Phillips we know is a real
Yes.
great person and would be a good addition too. So I hope we keep these names so that when there's a turnover, we can come back to them.
Great. All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? It passes unanimously. All right, so the work on the high school district, again, you can see that essentially there are only, Dr. Sarvis circled the ones where there really was no other possibility. And then he put dots around the ones where we have some choices to make. There's only 2 categories that we have choices in, and that's business and community member. So,
We have a lot of choices in parent. And-
in parent,
Yeah, I don't
they-
understand about no other possibility. Can you
Well-
explain that a little bit?
Well, in parent, for example, the first one, Karen Anderson, gets circled by, instead she's in parent PTA. Ingalls, she gets slotted over to parent PTA. Mark Ingalls gets slotted into the Education Foundation. Valnora gets, could be either parent or community member. So he's gotten the dots on the community member side. And Rob Ramirez already got taken away. Lynn Rodriguez already got taken away. And then Alex Rodriguez was in the, they got taken away, by the elementary district.
No, not Alex.
Sorry, not Alex, but I'm referring back to Rob and Lynn got taken away. So Rob's dotted line is in the community member side. And so we could also jump in between
What about
community
the
member.
last name? What about Mike Zarati?
Mike Zarati, he is dotted on the community member side. One thing that, looking at, we have Nancy Harder and Mike Zarati. They both serve on the Measure V committee. And so I'm reluctant personally to have members serving on 2 of our oversight committees.
Well, I like Mike Zarati because he's a CPA.
He's a CPA and he's serving on the Measure V committee. Mr. Herron?
Yeah, Nancy Harder does not serve on the Measure V committee any longer.
She is going on as a community member.
If we
Oh,
voted
but
on
she's only one of a number of possibilities in that column, is that, or do I misunderstand this whole system?
Yes, in the community member column, she's one of many, but I would be reluctant to have her.
So why
because
are we
I'm-
pairing her off against Zarati? Why not?
We're not.
Zarati against?
We're not.
Oh, okay.
I would just like to say I agree. I think we want diversity in these groups, and I don't think we want the same people serving on multiple committees. This is an opportunity to get new input, and so
Right.
That's why I think Nancy Harder and Mike Zarati are ready. Well, we don't know if Nancy's yet on the Measure V committee, but
Well, I think the Measure V committee constitutes itself essentially.
we'll be making that decision.
Mr. Herron?
Yeah, I was at the meeting, and they did not. They are going to come to a recommendation
Mhm.
that we appoint somebody, but they specifically did not indicate Nancy Harder.
Okay. All right.
Can I?
Yes.
Oh,
Go ahead, Mrs. Cordero.
if they're going to recommend to us that we appoint somebody, I kind of assumed that Nancy was on the Measure V committee, but if they're going to recommend that we appoint somebody, I would prefer to appoint her to the Measure V Oversight Committee than to the Parcel Tax Oversight Committee. But I still am not clear why Alex Rodriguez was eliminated, because I would actually like to recommend that we
Consider him
consider
for the
Alex
parent,
Rodriguez
or
as the
for
parent.
we could put dots around him for the parent, and he's already got dots around his name for the community member, and that would also be true for Val Norona. Okay, so let's deal with the business category first, and there the 2 choices are Patsy Hicks, Douglas Martin. Mr. Herron's already weighed in on this. Any other comments on it? I've read their applications. Yeah, Mrs. Cordero?
No, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, just that I read their applications and they both look like, you know, great candidates, so.
They do both look like very good candidates, but I think I was kind of leaning towards the arts being
Mhm.
represented in this, because I think we have people representing sort of the business, I'm sorry, the taxpayer position. So I was leaning towards Patsy Hicks.
Mhm. Any other board comment on it?
What is her title?
Is she the one that was at the Museum of Art?
Right. Is that really business? Her position?
That's a good point.
Does Mr. Martin, is he affiliated with Nick Rail Music?
He's in the room,
Oh,
so you
good.
can ask him directly.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Martin.
Wow, a job interview. I love it. I've done many things in my time here in Santa Barbara. I did work at Nick Rail for a couple of years. I did work at City Commerce Bank for 6 years. I'm currently employed by the county as the Chief Financial Officer for the Santa Barbara County Sheriff's Department. I'm personally a musician. I've been an amateur musician for more years I'd rather disclose. If you'd like me to serve, I'll serve. If you don't want me to serve, I'm not offended. So.
Well, thank you. I mean, to me, that's sort of a nice combination of clear business background, but also connected to the arts. Again, I think that we have we could have a backup candidate here that hopefully would just step on the next time that there's an opening, which there will be in 1 or 2 years.
Board members?
Yes?
Patsy Hicks is the Director of Education for the Museum of Art.
Okay, thank you. So, any other comments on the business side? Yes, Mrs. Deegan?
Well, I would just like to say I agree that Mr. Martin seems to have a nice combination of business and the arts.
Let's go to parent and community member. Now, community member has a lot of dotted circles. There is some overlap with the parents. There was Janet Rouse, Alex Rodriguez, and Val Nerona. Comments on these three? I know Janet Rouse from her work with the district in the past, and she's been a tremendous parent at Santa Barbara High.
Well, she also was involved in the PTA, although I know we're not selecting her in that category, but she has had that experience as well. I wasn't sure from Mr. Nerona's resume if he was a parent. He's an active parent, I guess.
And I
Yes.
didn't bring those ones out
Yeah,
here. He
actually,
might
I
be
think that's true.
Yeah.
We're talking about community member?
We're looking at both parent and community
Parent and
members sort of at the same time. There's a little bit of an overlap there. Mr.
What about
Herron?
Mike Couch? He's certainly got a sterling.
Well, we're looking at parent and community members. So
He just said community member.
but parent and community members, the ones that have the overlap. Let's take a look at that, Mr. Herron.
I know Janet Rouse, and I know she's very active, very concerned. So if that would be the third vote, I'd go with Janet.
Let's see. So for parent PTA, that would leave Karen Anderson, who of course has a tremendous background in Montecito Union. Mrs. Cordero?
Well, I wanted to speak to Alex Rodriguez, to his candidacy. He has a long time involvement with the Hispanic Chamber, which also represents a business background as well as being a parent, and representing a segment of the population that doesn't seem to be represented on our committee.
Would you suggest him then for the community member?
I was actually going to suggest him for the parent.
But he could also be community member.
He also could be community member, although I was leaning towards suggesting Michael Couch for the community member who could not fit the parent category.
We had talked a little bit about gender makeup. I
Mhm.
think if we actually went with Janet Rouse, and then possibly Mr. Rodriguez in the community member category, then we would have more.
It's not overwhelmingly male.
Right. It's a more even split.
Mr. Herron.
I see.
Well,
Mis-
I remember Alex.
Mr. Herron
Sorry.
has the floor, and then you can have it, Dr. Noel.
I see Mike Couch's name on an awful lot of documents, so he's very active with the district as it is. So maybe in light of what we've done, maybe we should share the wealth.
I just want to be a little careful too. He doesn't serve on the administrative hearing panels, does he?
I would consider him a district employee.
I can see he's a
Yes.
district employee, so I don't think we can include him. Dr. Noel?
Oh, you just shot down.
Sorry.
I know Alex Rodriguez, and I support Mrs. Cordero's suggestion.
All right. So this puts us at Douglas Martin for Business, Elaine Gordon Senior Citizens Group, Lanny Ebenstein Taxpayers Association, Janet Rouse Parent, Karen Anderson Parent PTA, Mark Ingalls Santa Barbara Education Foundation, and Alex Rodriguez Community Member. Any further discussion, or can I have a motion?
I move we accept this panel as recommended.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. It passes unanimously. All right, and with that, we move on to item E3, adoption of resolution number 0809-25 for Harding Elementary School's Farmers Market.
May I make a brief comment on the remaining agenda items before we do? We do have people here for the Harding Farmers Market. We do need to take action on E4 on student expulsion. We do have Shireen Katapush here for a presentation to the board on fighting back, and we do have the consultant here for F3, the report on post-retirement benefit actuarial.
All right, I think that we will be running a little bit late this evening, board members. So let's go ahead and see if we can make up a little bit of time on E3. And
Okay, I'll make this very quick.
Thank you.
We have quite a few members of the Harding community, or the West Side, here in the audience tonight, and I have received probably 10 to 12 emails in the last couple days about the proposed Harding Farmers Market, all of them extremely positive and talking about how that is going to very much support their community, their neighborhood, as well as Harding School. So without reading the agenda item, know you've read it. It is a pilot program, starting out with 12 stalls only. And I'm here to ask for the adoption of resolution 0809-25, the Harding School Farmers Market, and of course the attachments there with the resolution.
And we have
Any questions?
public comment
Public
on
comments,
it?
probably.
Anybody want to take public comment before questions, or?
I think I just have a really quick
Okay, Mrs. Cordero?
Ms. Sawatsky?
So, I'm sorry.
That's okay. You said it was a pilot program. When are we then, does a resolution adopted only for a particular time period?
I don't believe that's the way there isn't a restricted time on it, but we wanted to start it as a pilot. I know typically pilots do have an ending date, but in order to start this with the Farmers Market
I guess
Association.
part of my question would be then, how is it going to be determined whether it's being successful or not? Or when will that be determined?
Good question.
And will it come back to us for us to then make it permanent?
Yeah, may I suggest that we bring it back to you before winter break this next year, so that not a full year has elapsed, and we then make it a permanent program, if it is a successful program. I too have heard nothing but positive comments, support and advocacy for the program.
How many public comments?
6.
We have 6 public comments on it. I know it's very late. It's 10:15, and that could run us quite a long time. I know that I just suspect that everybody in the room is in support of this program. So would it be possible, instead of, I know you all want to make your statements, but would it be possible for you to stand up as a group to express you could even come to the podium and speak for 5 minutes together, just so that we could have board discussion on it.
Madam President?
Yes?
I have a couple of questions, and they would probably have the answers.
Right.
So perhaps I could ask my questions now?
Would you be willing, yes, would you be willing to come to the podium together, supporters of the Harding School Farmers Market, come to the podium together, and then Dr. Noel has questions that you can answer, and we'll spend a few minutes on this. It's wonderful to be able to see. It's wonderful to be able to see all of you here, so thank you. And Dr. Noel, your questions.
My prefacing remark is it's a terrific idea, and I expect terrific ideas out of Harding. It's a tradition now. The questions are very nitty-gritty, and one of them is liability issues. 2 is a contract. Is there a contract? All this may be down the line, but anyway, none of this is supplied. Okay, who's going to clean it up? All the terms of the terms of usage.
Edelman, I think you're on.
All right.
Wait a minute.
Yes, go ahead.
The last question, most important one. Is there any money in it for Harding?
No.
Okay. I'll answer the first 2 questions. I think Sally can answer the next. As far as liability, our Farmers Market Association, I'm Sam Edelman, I'm the general manager of the Farmers Market Association. We do personally require or have $2 million in liability insurance, and we do, any site that we hold the farmers market on, we do list them as an additionally insured party. So you guys are as well covered. So if anything happens, if somebody trips over something, eats anything, any bad food, which is neither of the incidents have ever happened in my time with the market, we cover that. Our liability insurance covers that.
Contract.
A contract, we could discuss a contract. We don't have anything set in writing at this point, but the Farmers Market Association is in full support of this project and would be more than willing to establish a contract. I'm sorry?
The Farmers Market Association would be the contracting party?
Yes, correct.
I will tell you that in our preliminary discussions, we did have a conversation about an MOU being necessary and the terms and conditions being prescribed in the MOU.
Great.
And as far as your cleanup question, we do leave a site as we found it. So we basically are responsible for all the cleanup. We leave our spot sightless as we arrive.
That all has to be in the document.
That's correct.
Now, the last question is money.
Okay.
A lot of people have asked that, what will Harding get out of it? And since I've been at Harding, we've closed the campus because of vandalism, graffiti, all kinds of things you don't want kids to see when they arrive to school, or for the custodian to spend his time cleaning up. We have neighbors here and an environment committee, we have a vision of opening the school up again. I feel like this is a wonderful way to do 3 things. One is to promote what we're doing in the cafeteria so it's not in isolation, and provide fresh, healthy food to families on site and around Harding. 2, to help build a community that has been changed because we have enrollment policies that people take advantage of, and so we have families who don't know each other that live next door because they attend different schools. And then the 3rd thing is to be a viable neighbor and to give back to the community, because by closing the campus, I think many of the families, whether they attend the school or not, feel like something was taken away. There are questions about could 6th grade raise money for science camp, but I feel like our #1 job is to get the school to be that important neighbor again.
Thank you. Board members, other questions? Mrs. Deacon?
If we approve this, when would the first farmer's market be?
I know we're looking, I need about a 1-month time frame from whenever our decision is officially made. We were shooting for some time after the daylight savings, the clocks change, which is coming up very quickly here. So, a month from whenever we could possibly get going, as soon as we got the word.
Mrs. Cordero?
I'd like to move that we adopt Resolution 08/09/25, the Harding School Farmers Market Resolution.
Mr. Herron?
I just presume none of these speakers were for not in that group. There's nobody sitting out there that wants to talk, right? Okay.
Absolutely. Before we take the vote on it, I just want to say thank you, Dr. Kingston, for spearheading this. I mean, this is a tremendous, wonderful idea, and I love the neighbors that have participated in this, and Sam, it's just great, and Helene Schneider taking the lead on it from the city side and from the West Side neighborhood side. It's just a great idea. This is exactly what we all want to see in terms of our schools and our cities and communities and neighborhoods working together to make it's just sort of a multi-use facility and something that really serves a neighborhood in many different ways. So with that, we'll take a vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. It carries unanimously. So thank you.
Thank
Really
you. And
looking
can I
forward. We'll
make
be
one comment?
Yes.
This came out of a conversation with two teachers. One is Carol Schwitzer and the other is Verity Allen in how do we promote healthy food at schools. So I think that the beginning of the project really started in collaboration. So thank you to the teachers too.
Thank you.
I wouldn't mind saying that I'm a new board member of Fairview Gardens and Center for Urban Agriculture, and any way that we can support, I'm going to go back to the board and let them know about this action, and I appreciate everybody who worked on it.
Thank you, Mr. Sargar. All right. So now.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
I wrote the Ed Hat article. I'm David Pritchett. There's a 10% neighborhood concern from our outreach, and people, like in all neighborhoods, express concern about traffic because it's so successful it will attract lots of people. But your mechanism to have a limit of 12 vendors and 6 or 9 month or whatever the duration was, Mr. Sarvis mentioned, is a way to alleviate that concern because it's going to be so successful. You now have a mechanism to cool it off if it's beyond the neighborhood. So that's out there in the public discourse,
All right.
just a wee little bit.
Thank
Thanks.
you. And with that, we will move on to item E4. Board action on student expulsion case numbers 0809-29-32, -35, -36, -37, -40, and an expungement of 0708-08. So, board members?
In case 0809-29, I move that we adopt the recommendations of the hearing panel.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Carries unanimously.
In case 0809-32, I move that we adopt the stipulated agreement.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? It passes unanimously.
Aye.
In case 0809-35, I move that we adopt the stipulated agreement.
Second.
All those in favor? That was Dr. Noel that seconded it. All those in favor?
Aye.
It passes unanimously.
In case 0809-36, I move that we adopt the stipulated agreement.
Second.
It was Cordero and Deacon. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
That was an aye.
Okay, it passes
I
unanimously.
thought it.
Okay.
In case 0809-37, I move that we adopt the recommendations of the hearing panel, but that we suspend the expulsion.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
I
Aye.
thought-
Oh, yes, Dr.
Question,
Noel?
I think there was would you consider specifying that where the student would attend school in your motion?
It would be district placement.
I think it would be district placement.
But
So
the-
I'm not gonna, I didn't want to specifically
The
identify.
student would
but-
not return to the.
But
Yeah,
oh, okay, but the student would not return to his or her home school.
Or
Yeah.
existing school.
Yeah.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Carries unanimously.
And in case 0809-40, I move that we approve the stipulated agreement.
Second.
We're going to give that one to Mr. Herron. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Passes unanimously. And moving on to the expungement.
In case 0708-08, I move that we approve the parents' request to expunge the expulsion.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
It carries unanimously. And now we move on to item F2. Very patient Ms. Katapush. Thank you so much, and I'm sorry that this is so late.
Oh, F2, where am I? We don't have anything for F2.
Let me apologize in advance. I have both liquids and throat lozenges, neither of which seem to be helping my cough. So if I'm coughing, I apologize. So I use this, Davis.
Try and see what works.
Which way do I point it? No. Technology.
Okay, I can just do it.
Great.
This is a point.
She'll go ding, and then.
Oh, I need to point. That's okay.
Okay.
I'll just smile at you or nod or something. Hello. I am Shireen Katapush. I don't know all of you, but I am the director of the Youth Services System for the Council on Alcoholism and Drug Abuse and for Fighting Back, which is our community collaborative, which has been in place, and you have been a significant partner in for the last 15 years. And we have youth service specialists serving on each of the secondary school campuses and have for about 15 years now. So I'm here tonight just in celebration and appreciation. I wanted to share with you a little bit about what the YSSs have been up to this last semester. Also, I have a few comments at the end about our successful grants to reduce alcohol abuse. That was a 3-year grant we had from the Department of Education that recently ended, and our colleagues at RAND were the evaluators on that grant. They weren't able to be here tonight because of where they live and the hour of our presentation. So I'm presenting some of those data for them, but we do have some good results from our efforts on that grant. So.
I've got it here, but I haven't plugged it in.
Okay. So those were just quick pictures of some of our youth service specialists on each of the campuses. Our YSSs are providing a lot of education and outreach and support and leadership skills. I know recently you've been talking about your pyramid of interventions, and our YSSs are providing sort of what we think of as tiered services along that pyramid. So I'm going to talk sort of up the pyramid if you think of your interventions. They are doing campus-wide campaigns like Red Ribbon Week and Free for the Weekend, which reach all of the students. Our Friday Night Live and Club Live chapters are providing leadership skills and opportunities for kids to have safe and sober fun. We have over 600 kids who've joined those clubs this year so far. We do have peer mentoring on 4 campuses, 2 high schools joined with 2 junior high schools doing after-school mentoring. Thank you. We have our Reconnecting Youth classes, which targets a smaller percentage of students. Those are kids who are already struggling with school, with drugs, and this is a daily class that meets for a semester where they really get to focus on academic achievement, reducing their drug use, and they get some social and emotional skills too. Our super program, which I think you're familiar with, provides intervention when it's really clearly needed, when a student has been caught because of an alcohol or other drug infraction, and we've served over 40 students and their families this year. And then we're providing a lot of individual services to students on the campus. Those are services, not students. That number there, over 2,000. We've served over 500, almost 600 unique kids with individual services like counseling. These are just some pictures of our Friday Night Live Leadership Conference in the fall, where kids came together to plan the Red Ribbon campaign on their campuses. You can go kind of quickly through this part. I just wanted to show you pictures of these terrific campus campaigns where kids signed pledges to be alcohol and drug free. There were activities at lunchtime for them to participate with. So you can see they're wearing their wristbands to be drug and alcohol free. Lunchtime games and activities. I usually just come and give you numbers, so I thought this time I'd show you some pictures since you don't get to be out there and see what the YSSs are up to. This is a big sheet where kids signed the pledge to be drug and alcohol free at La Colina. This is a dance at La Colina. Yep. I know. Posters hanging, educational posters. This was great. Hundreds of students at San Marcos participated in this pumpkin decorating contest as part of Red Ribbon Week, so you can see drugs are for clowns. This was neat. Anyway, the YSSs are really creative about doing drug education and promotion. They also work with kids to do community service. We have some pictures here of the students participating in the Summit for Danny, which raises funds and awareness for youth alcohol and drug treatment. So these are groups of teens climbing our beautiful mountains with their YSSs. This was back in October. And then students volunteering at the Unity Shop as well over Christmas. Cigarette butt cleanups. So Friday Night Live is not just about, and Club Live, about providing activities on a Friday or a Saturday night. They're doing a lot of community service and engaging kids in giving back. We also had a weekend workshop with the folks from Royer Studios. They're the folks that do the animation for The Simpsons, and they came up and did a workshop with students, and they produced 2 terrific PSAs. I'll come back another time and show those to you on drinking and driving and not texting while driving. So kids got experience actually doing animation, drawing the animation. That was a really neat weekend workshop. And they were at Daniel Bryant doing something good on the weekend. This is a Magic Mountain trip we had in the fall. Some photos of our Reconnecting Youth classes. Okay, so in the fall semester, we had over 2,000 individual services provided to 571 students. So what that means is that on average, each student met with their YSS about 4 times. So what are these individual services? One-on-one support, follow-up, some therapeutic counseling, mediations, parent conferences, teacher conferences, and the like. What are the reasons that students are seeing YSSs? Emotional issues, family, conflict, anger, and violence, help with their classes and their schedule, grades, relationship. You might be surprised to see that alcohol and drugs is a relatively small percentage. Kids don't come to YSS initially as with alcohol and other drugs is the main identified reason, but alcohol and other drugs can underlie the conflict and anger problems, the family problems, the emotional problems. How did they get there? Mostly by student self-referral. 47% are kids just walking in and seeking help. YSS also then call kids back in to follow up with them, and then the rest of the referrals come from school-based staff. Who are we serving? Mostly young ladies. Girls tend to be more help-seeking than boys, so more girls than boys. And more Latino than white, about 75% Latino in this fall semester. And in terms of the other services that we're providing, not the YSSs on the campus, we're also serving kids and families through the Daniel Bryant Youth and Family Treatment Center, our Teen Court Mentor program, which serves elementary age students, our parent program, and then some in-home counseling that we do as well. For a grand total of nearly 2,000 individual services this fall semester. How am I doing on time?
We're watching the main clock. You have about 5 minutes if you want.
Terrific, great. Now I'd like to tell you a little bit about the grants to reduce alcohol abuse. Again, this is this 3-year grant that we had from the Department of Education. And the evaluation really had 2 prongs. One was to look at the California Healthy Kids data, the 7th, 9th, 11th grade data that's collected annually, and sort of see what kinds of broad trends or impacts there might be on the entire student population. And as you might imagine, with 1 or 2 YSSs on a campus, we're not seeing a lot there. But then the other sort of arm of the evaluation was to look very specifically at the pre and post tests of the specific programs that that grant enhanced and paid for, including Reconnecting Youth, pre and post test at the beginning and end of the semester, life skills training, Too Good for Drugs and Violence, those universal curricula that are delivered 7th through 12th grade, and then also the super program. Okay, so the California Healthy Kids Survey. These were the 3 measures, GIPRA measures they call them, that the Department of Ed wanted us to report on: binge drinking, harm from alcohol use, perceived harm, and then perceived disapproval of alcohol use. By and large, we didn't see significant results here. You see a downward trend in binge drinking, which is great. We did have a significant result there in that last year. And there were some significant results in all these data in particular subpopulations. And I can forward the report to you if you like. RAND looked by grade and by various demographics. You know, did it look different between 11th grade Latinas versus 9th grade males? That sort of thing. And significant results were found in particular populations. But so we did see a significant decrease in binge drinking, also in 7th grade. 30-day alcohol use and use at school. Harm from alcohol use, there wasn't really a change there. In fact, it looked like it was going in the wrong direction, but there was a wording change in the California Healthy Kids question. So those findings are sort of questionable. In terms of disapproval of alcohol use, that's heading in the right direction. We're seeing more kids disapproving of alcohol use, but unfortunately it wasn't a statistically significant finding. So. Reconnecting Youth. Over the course of the 3-year grant, we did see statistically significant improvement in these measures. In life skills, we saw statistically significant change in these measures, knowledge, skills. And in Too Good for Drugs and Violence, a number of statistically significant findings. And also with SUPER, we do a pre and a post test both with the teens and also with the parents and find terrific results there. So as I mentioned, we saw a lot more positive and sort of weighty effects from our particular program evaluations rather than the broad survey data. So we're very proud of that. I was just at the Community Anti-Drug Coalitions of America meeting in DC, and the program officer from the Department of Education said, well, I hope you'll apply for another one. So I hope that we will. They're not offering them this year, unfortunately, but they're very pleased with the work that we did together on that grant. And I'm happy to answer any questions that you have. I know these are tough times for us as well, but we really value our partnership and look forward to working with you in all the ways that we can to continue to serve students and families.
Thank you. Comments and questions? I just have to say a huge thank you because, I mean, I know that we see pieces of your program every meeting, essentially, and what it does to support parents and students. And I'm just thinking of parents because I'm looking at the SUPER program right now. But we have a great partnership.
We do.
And so, yes, I'm looking forward to that continuing on and despite the economy. So I know it's really hard right now, especially for those of you who are trying to raise money through the nonprofit world.
Well, we're all struggling, and we'll just hold hands and do the best we can do together.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, and I hope you feel better.
Thank you so much.
And now it's time for the report on post-retirement benefit actuarial. The highlight of the evening comes
There
at
we go.
10:35.
They heard the actuary was coming. So,
Again, thank you for your patience and for staying so late for us.
You're welcome. Thank you.
I think as the board knows, we're required by law to have an actuarial performed of our post-retirement benefit liability. What is it, every 2 years now, I believe? Brad Al from Aon Consulting has been before the board before. We have an updated actuarial study. He's going to present a PowerPoint presentation. Generally, I think he's going to point out the highlights of the study, including some contrast between this year's study and the last study that was performed. So I'm just going to turn it over to Brad. Thank you.
Thank you for having me, board members. I was here a few years back in 2006. I do remember some faces here. I'm not sure you'll remember me, and maybe that's good. And so what we're really here to do is kind of refresh the topic, and now we're into full swing on adoption of GASB 45, which is for other post-employment benefits, as you see here. I'm an actuary. Actuaries, basically, we evaluate the risk, and in this case, we're evaluating the risk of retiree medical, essentially, benefits. GASB 45 deals with employer reporting of other post-employment benefits. This impacts all school districts, all government agencies. First comes into effect for the district for the 2008 and 2009 fiscal year. This really it's an accounting standard that requires, well, I'll give you the details in a second, but it's essentially an accounting standard that is about 10 years behind where its sister or parent agency, FASB, is with non-public sector entities. So the recognition of these liabilities is kind of, it's already been occurring for many years now in the non-public sector. We performed here a July 1, 2007 valuation, and we're using those results for reporting for the district for the fiscal year ending 08-09. The requirement, I mentioned in a later slide, the requirement is to do a study at least every 2 years. And so results from one point in time can be used for fiscal years 2 years later, essentially. And that's what we're here to do, or that's what we've done. Actuarial calculations, what is it? It's really determining what the liability is for benefits that the district has promised to its retirees. And retirees means current retirees and current actives, or those that that are expected to retire from the district and receive these benefits. Our projection considers a number of different issues. The likelihood of turnover. In that case, that means that an employee, if turnover means withdrawal from service before retirement, and so what's important there is that if somebody leaves employment before they're eligible for retirement, they don't receive these benefits. That's an important characteristic. We also look at when your employees retire, because that dictates how long they'll receive these benefits and what the resulting liability is. And then mortality also deals with how long they're going to receive the benefits. So we look at all those aspects. We project out benefits into all future years for our current population. We get these future cash flows. We also consider future health care costs, what they might be. Those are all in our projections, and then we discount them back to today for the time value of money, essentially, to say, hey, what is our liability today? And what do we need to recognize under the pertinent accounting rules? So what are we dealing with? It's essentially expense recognition for retiree obligations. So the accountants will tell you that the appropriate way to accrue for costs or expenses is to allocate those expenses to the appropriate period by matching them with revenue, or at least when you're receiving the benefits of those costs. And that's essentially during the period when employees are earning these benefits, so their years of service with the district. Currently, you're on a pay-as-you-go basis, meaning that we recognize liabilities as they're paid out for retirees. And so what happens is it's like not setting aside anything or not accruing for these costs up until the point where you know exactly what they are, somebody's retired, and you kind of recognize it at the end. Well, at that time, it's too late to either pre-fund or to accrue for in advance. And so what the GASB accounting rules are doing is it's requiring you to accrue for these liabilities as the employees earn these benefits. As you'll see in some other slides, this is an increase from pay-as-you-go recognition. So that's a big hubbub in the GASB OPEB world. It's now we've got to accrue for this, and it affects financial statements now. Feel free to interrupt me. listening to actuaries is not the most exciting things, but at least then I'll know you're awake.
Can I just clarify, when
Sure.
you mean accrue, you mean basically disclose the full liability as opposed to fund the full liability?
Yeah, there is no requirement, I think I have it on legislature, I'm not sure, but there is no requirement to pre-fund. What GASB is saying is you need to accrue for that, or you need to recognize a liability as we go along. Now, it's not necessarily the full liability, and I'll address that a little later too. But thank you for that question. So what are the benefits that we're talking about? This is a brief summary. There's a lot of details. Benefit levels are dependent on what classification you're in. Certified and classified, for the most part, they're fixed dollar benefits until age 65. For management confidential, the amount is dependent on how many years of service you have, and a specific percentage applies based on those years of service, and it's coverage for lifetime. Okay, and there's a lot of other categories. I think you were provided a copy of the report. I don't expect that you read it all, but those are all detailed in the report. So what did we do here? We had, as I mentioned, we had evaluation. We performed it as of July 1, 2007. What does that mean? It means that when we did the projections out, they're based on our census data as of July 1, 2007, projected out and discounted back to July 1, 2007 for purposes of coming up with a liability. So the liabilities are present values at the valuation date. The discount rate, critical aspect. Well, what GASB tells us to do is to select a discount rate based on the expected long-term return of investments used to finance the benefits. So if you are able to pre-fund and put aside money, and let's say that those funds could earn 5%, you would use a 5% discount rate. If instead those funds were only going to earn 3%, you would use a 3% discount rate. So the higher rate that we discount at, the lower the liabilities. Okay, so that's kind of an important concept. And we show results based on that 3% and 5% return. I mentioned healthcare inflation rates, medical trend. Real important to know, especially where healthcare costs are today and where they have been over the past 10 years or so, 15 years. Where are they going to be in the future? I don't have a crystal ball, but there are basic assumptions that we do use, and it's kind of standard industry assumptions, and we can talk about that if you'd like. And then the other assumptions I mentioned. The other assumptions that we use are standard assumptions that are used by both CalPERS and CalSTRS pension programs. So we're picking up, using their assumptions. They've done extensive experience studies, and we're using those here. So here are the liabilities. The present value of future benefit. If you kind of look at the pie chart down here, present value of benefits considers both past and future service. So essentially what we do is we project out all benefit payments for all future years, for all current employees and retirees. And we discount them back to today, and that's what the present value of benefits is, are. I'll get to the numbers in a second. The accrued liabilities just say, if we took that entire pie chart, all benefits ever expected to be earned, paid to current participants, and we said, well, how much of that would we allocate to past service? That's what the actual accrued liability is. So for example, if we have a retiree, all their service is in the past, they're not going to have any more, their present value of benefits is equal to the accrued liability, the actuarial accrued liability. If we look at an active participant who, let's say, is assumed to work 30 years with the district, and today they have 20 years, the accrued liability is 20/30 or 2/3 of the PVB or the whole pie. So what you see at the bottom is roughly 73% of our liability is for past service obligations. Okay, so that's just kind of catching up to where we are today. Future normal cost, that's what's not in the past is in the future. And the little sliver in there that's really part of normal cost, a future normal cost, is what we call normal cost, and that's just a single year. It's the value of of benefits earned in a single year. Actually, if you can go back 1 second, sorry about that. So this is the range of results based on the various assumptions. The 10.7, the left column refers to the 5% discount rate we use, and the right numbers, or the high end of the range, is the 3% liabilities. As I mentioned, the lower discount rate gives higher liabilities. So you can see how sensitive these results are to the discount rate assumption. Okay, so that's the idea here. Okay, comparison to prior valuation results. Good news here. One thing I usually start off by saying, these are just projections into the future. We come up with these. It's all based on our assumptions, and the reality is we're never right. It's just a matter of how close we are, and our numbers are only as good as our assumptions. All right. So what we see here is these are the results. This is based on a 3% discount rate. These are millions of dollars in this table. And in 2005, and the number to kind of look at is the accrued liability, and because that's the past service. And if anybody asks you, what are your liabilities today, that's probably the number that you want to reference. So what was $14.7 million in 2005 dropped. Now, we expect that number to either be the same or to grow. The reason it grows is your employees continue to earn benefits, right? They continue to provide services, they continue to earn benefits. So it increases, we expect it to increase some degree with this normal cost, okay? And so it dropped. So why did it drop? Well, as I mentioned, we have an assumption for healthcare inflation, and what happened is our experience there was good. In other words, healthcare costs didn't go up as much as what we assumed in the last valuation. I won't promise that will happen every year in the future, but that's what happened in the last couple of years. The second, and then we had some cleanup of data and some understanding of the benefits in the information that we were provided. And so that had some effect also. So those are the two primary reasons, but the good news is the number has come down. The one thing I haven't mentioned is the ARC, the annual required contribution. This concept is similar to what, sorry if I'm coming in and out here, hopefully that's not too annoying. The concept is similar to what you have on your pension benefits that CalPERS gives you and CalSTRS gives you. And the ARC is an annual required contribution. The R in the middle, required, is a little bit of a misnomer. There's nothing required about it, as Eric mentioned. It really is, it's just it's an actuarially determined annual cost, all right? And so that range of cost, we provided a range here. Really, these numbers are based on the 3%, and so it's really that 1.5 number. And these results are all in the report. So it was 1.9, and now it's coming down to 1.5 million if we use a 3% assumption. All right, going back to one of our statements, what dictates what assumption we use? It depends on whether we intend on pre-funding or not. So if we're going to pre-fund and put it aside in something and we're going to earn 5%, you use a 5% discount rate. If you decide that you can't do that and the funds used to finance the benefits really are only going to grow at 3%, then you use a 3% discount rate. And so that's what we've shown here is 3%. Okay. Kind of just a summary of what we had there. The required accrual amount, or the ARC that I mentioned, depends on the discount rate and amortization period. These are all detailed in the report results in the report, and it ranges from $800,000 to $1.5 million per year. That compares to a pay-as-you-go amount of roughly $700,000 per year. All right, so what the two big issues are, we've got to accrue for this on an annual basis beginning in fiscal year 08-09. Second aspect is, depending on what we decide to do, will impact whether we have a liability on on the balance sheet or a net OPEB obligation. So, given these numbers here, 1.5 million assumes we don't pre-fund, okay? What would happen there is that the difference in those two, so we got the 700,000 we're paying. That's what we're paying to current retirees, not a whole lot of choice there. The 1.5 million is what the required accrual would be if we don't pre-fund. The difference, roughly 800,000, that's what would show up as a balance sheet liability or a net OPEB obligation. Okay. Now, if you pre-fund, the accrual is 800,000, and that's what you're required to contribute. But it's really the only excess cash that you need to put in beyond what you're already doing is the difference between the two, 800,000 versus 700,000. Okay, so I don't want to say it's only 100,000. I don't mean to, belittle it like that. But it's relatively, compared to what these other numbers are, it's not a huge amount. Well, those numbers, if we look at our projections, will probably diverge. We expect the $800,000 number goes up over time, because the way we did this is it assumes that those costs go up as payroll costs go up. The $700,000, we've got that in the projection also, and that actually levels off and starts to go down. That's just the nature of the benefits with the current participants. It'll eventually go back up, but that's what it looks like for a while. So I don't want you to be deceived by this, by where the numbers are today. So pre-funding, it can be, it's an issue. It means that you've got to come up with cash to set aside. Okay. These are just kind of general issues, pre-funding alternatives. As I mentioned, it's not required to pre-fund, but unfunded plans result in higher accruals and balance sheet liabilities. We saw that on the last page. Bargaining, this is where the benefits come from. It's a key component in the contracts, and it's critical to how they're defined there. But it gives you an idea of what we've broken down the liabilities by bargaining groups, so it kind of gives you an idea of what where the liabilities sit, and then possibly, how do you deal with that if you need to, and then to the extent that any agencies, districts, whatever, borrow money and have a cost of debt, those unfunded liabilities are anticipated to affect that. To what degree, it really depends on what the magnitude of that is, of those liabilities are. All right. Any questions, since I kind of just kept on rambling?
Thank you. Any questions?
Or do you just
for
want me to
Mr.
go
Al?
home? Or do you just want to go home?
Any questions? Comments? It was an excellent report and very understandable.
All right.
And we actually just got these today, so we will read through them and follow up with any questions with Mr. Smith, and he can contact you. So thank you so much.
Sounds good. Thank you for
All
having
right.
me.
Have a good night.
All right, thank you, Brad.
And Dr. Hayden, I'm so sorry that we will skip you again for F4, pulling that one. We do need to return to consent items, and they are D1. Mrs. Deacon, did you pull D1?
I did. On page 5 of 6 on the minutes from January 17th, E4, I think that there's just a wording.
I'm sorry, did you say
problem here.
January 13th?
Sorry, 13th, yes. On E4, it says, motion made by Board Member Deacon to approve the suspended expulsion. It wasn't initially a suspended expulsion, so I think it should probably read to approve a suspended expulsion. We changed it from a regular expulsion. And just looking at the voting here, I'm not sure that's accurate. this jog anyone's memory? I think, Mrs. Parker, you actually were the
I
no
was
vote.
I was the no vote, and I'm glad that you
why
caught
did I-
that.
yeah.
So, that's what it is. Okay, it's so switch that around to Heron being one of the ayes, and Parker being one of the noes, or the no, on that one, I should say. Any other comments on that one? Is there a motion to approve it as amended?
I move to approve as amended.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
It passes unanimously. Then the next on the list was D3, and this was Dr. Noel.
Well, it's, we already talked about it a little bit. I want to make sure I understand that. In approving this, $7,000 expenditure funded by the Pupil Retention Block Grant, which is a California categorical program, we will have $7,000 less money at some point in the future that could be transferred to the general fund to help us offset our any educational
Right,
expense.
right.
Is that correct?
That's correct, and I know that Kathy Abney and LaQuesta put this forward with this funding source because that's really all they have at their disposal. That's all they're allocated. They don't have Title II funds. However, I'm going to suggest that we take this and use district Title II funds and substitute this so that we can have that flexibility.
Well, I would like to see that, because it's just, we have a spending freeze on
Exactly.
on conference travel out of the general fund.
Right.
And this is simply a matter of timing. It's the same thing.
Exactly.
Yeah. So,
Is there a motion to approve staff travel for the first item, Cynthia White, and come back with the LaQuesta Continuation High School proposal?
so moved.
Well, could we ask you to go ahead and approve this subject to the change to Title II funding?
Are you willing to make that
Was-
change?
That's
Wasn't that
fine,
what you were
yes,
recommending?
that's what I was
Yes.
recommending, that we
I-
substitute that,
Okay.
yes.
Is there a
I
second?
would make that motion,
Okay.
subject to the funding shift to Title II.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
It passes unanimously. Then we're on to D6, and that was
That was me.
recommended
That was,
personnel actions.
Every time I see all these Avid expenditures, I mean, I've not really ever run a total, but Avid's costing us a piece of change. And as I said to you during the break, Mrs. Sawaski, I have two questions about it. Always want to know what we're doing about evaluating these programs rather than just letting them run. But there's an intermediate step, and that is, I just learned this term recently, fidelity of implementation. Okay? What do we... And I base this on something Dr. Sarvis told me a long time ago. Said that Avid can be a great program, and it could be a pretty weak program. It all depends on how well it's implemented. And do we have a plan? I mean, do we, on an ongoing basis, systematically, find out how well this is being implemented?
Yes. I want to address the first part as far as the fidelity. We have in place this time, I understand that Avid was in our district before. We do have in place our district representatives from each of the sites, and we have a lead in Elise Simmons and Cynthia White that oversees this program. And so as far as the fidelity piece and the training that you see, that's being paid for out of federal funding, which we want to spend, is a piece that is important to the fidelity. It also includes the tracking and the evaluation. And we're just starting to have students who have gone through our program so that we can actually show, not only through our own data, but they're connected to the state data and the national data on how those Avid students who started in 9th grade, and in our case, we started earlier, but we can track the 9th grade that are graduating to see how well they're doing, to see
Okay,
if
but that's
it's
my
making a
second.
difference.
You're ahead of me now. Okay. That's the outcomes. That's the second issue.
Exactly.
The evaluation, is it being implemented? Because you can't expect the outcome if it is
If it's not being implemented, yes.
So the first issue is it being implemented? And I ask this because I would love to feel confident that we have some measures of how well it is being implemented. And secondly, assuming it is well implemented, then we need measures of outcomes. And that, I don't want to say anymore. I wanted to use this occasion to make that
to say
speech.
that. I will ask also that the board receives, as soon as we have some data that we can put forward. I know you've seen the Avid presentation, but as soon as we have something that we can put in a board brief, or if you'd like to then turn that into a presentation, we can do that as well. That would be toward the end of the year.
Thank you so much.
And
I move to adopt,
is there a second?
to approve this.
And I just want to comment on this. For the hourly employment, it doesn't specify what fund these payments come from, but these are all federal Title II.
I noticed that as well when I was reviewing this.
And that's the way it has been for the most
know.
part for the hourly. But just to clarify,
Know that Cynthia White and I are both checking, and I know that people in fiscal are also checking to make sure that the freeze is in place, and that we are using Title II for most of this, sometimes Title I, some
Right.
of the.
That makes sense,
Yes.
but not general fund.
Exactly. Oh, no, never general fund,
Never
no.
general fund. Okay, so all those in favor? Aye. It passes unanimously. And from there, we move on to D13, which is rejection of all bids, portable classroom relocation at Washington Elementary School. And that was Mrs. Deacon.
I'm assuming that the reason we're rejecting this is because we don't have the money. And I understand that, and so I'm inclined to go ahead and support this, but I also wanted to take this occasion. I'm sure multiple board members got emails from Washington parents who had concerns also about safety at the site, and they made some recommendations about cleaning up debris and things like that, and I was wondering if that's something that we can move on.
Dr. Sarver?
Right.
I know, Dr.
As you know, this is all part of the Mitchum settlement. This is part of the ADA accessibility lawsuit, and we were required either to reconfigure all of those portables as they stood, and we decided in the end that we could redesign so that we could put them all in a row and ramp them all at the same time and clean up the school quite a bit. I mean, we were very content with that. We ran plans forward to DSA, got approval. We carefully considered our bond refunding. We refunded our bonds, 18 months ago, something like that, so we would have the money in the bank. And we believed that we would never hear from the Attorney General on that decision when we, 3 or 4 months ago, decided to use that bond refunding money. We've since received a letter from, the opinion from the Attorney General, and I have that coming to the board for discussion on the part of the board so that you can have that discussion. But at that point in time, we removed this item from the last agenda, and we brought it back now as a rejection of all bids. I understand, no one is as unhappy about this as Dave Hetyoung, as Eric, and myself, because it leaves the campus in a mess. And it leaves these portables really bisecting the playground. It messes up the playground. The poor neighbors have had to look at the side of a portable over their back fence. It really needs to get done. However, we suddenly have no money. So we will go out to the school. We'll meet with the school. There are a number of current issues about the mess there and the safety, about chain link fences and steel and grading, and we will address those and mitigate those to the best of our ability, and then we will, based on the board discussion, come back to what funding we will have and when we will have it. And I've already notified David Lack, for instance, that I talked to him directly and said that I'm sorry that this is the recommendation. Our intention at this point in time would be to come back to all of these potential bidders with probably developer fee money. Now, I know we keep talking about using developer fee money, and there is not much of it. There isn't enough to get this done right now, so we would have to wait until we had that money. But we will follow up on it, yes.
Mr. Herron?
Yes, a couple questions. What was done to notify the parents that or, the parents, I guess, or maybe the neighbors, but parents for sure, that the reasons for why it was stopped. We got to, we got to, again, we got a lot of interesting notes from parents that, to me, express about three different things. One is the immediate problem. Currently, the chain link fence has 3 openings in it. Currently, a concrete platform is set up for jumps for skateboarders, and they'll be there this weekend using it. It wouldn't take much with a bulldozer to eliminate the blight. To me, that's a fairly easy thing to eliminate. But how were the parents notified that all of a sudden this project is stopped? And more importantly, how were have the neighbors been notified, or are they going to be notified of where we stand on this, and why? And why? Because I don't think they understand why.
Well, I really don't know. We don't have Dave Young here. I don't know, Eric, whether you have that answer. I don't know how they were notified or when they were notified. I was besieged with emails just as you were, and the parents were all in shock by it. So I assumed that that when they did learn about it, that there wasn't a very complete explanation, and sometimes there might be a very thorough explanation, and it's still unacceptable to our parents, because it's unacceptable to us as well, yet we don't have the money to get it completed, and that's what we want to do. We want to get it completed. So that's why we will be going out to the school.
It's great to get it completed, but I think the initial step is get rid of the blight. The frustration comes from the small things. Adults can talk about the big thing, and there's good reasons why it's not done. I don't think there's very many good reasons of why the blight is there, because, as I say, give me a bulldozer and a couple of Marburg bins, and the blight can be eliminated.
Board member work project this weekend.
Well, and it's a safety issue too, I
Yes.
think, which is the
And
point
Mrs.
the parents were
Cordero,
making.
did you want to say something?
I'm sorry. I just wanted to clarify, when you say we're going to meet with them, that hopefully that means like tomorrow, and that the rubble part of it is going to be addressed immediately, because I think that's where a lot of the concerns are coming in, that it does create potential hazard for the students, because the long-term resolution is going to be exactly that, long-term, but we can do some immediate things that would help.
Well, it won't be tomorrow. I only notified Dave this afternoon that we needed to get out there and take a look at it, assess, see what we could get done, and plan to meet with the parents, and we would need to notify them anyway.
Yes.
But
as soon as possible.
we will act quickly.
And I hope it's with the
I agree.
PTO and not just, just sort of showing up after school and hoping that whoever can show up. So it'd be nice for them
Oh,
to have
no,
the
that needs to
opportunity to arrange a meeting. All right, is there a motion?
I move that we reject these bids as proposed.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
It passes unanimously. All right, with that, we are back to coming events, which we discussed earlier during the superintendent's report. Board comments and correspondence. And future agenda items. Mrs. Deacon?
This is one I've actually discussed with staff and Dr. Sarvis, but I'd like to see us develop a list of shovel-ready.
Is your mic on?
Sorry. I'd like to see us develop a list of our shovel-ready projects, and I know these are things that the board would probably have to prioritize. Hopefully the Washington project would be on there if it's not, the developer fees and money isn't available, but I think the community would like to know which projects we have that are kind of on the runway in the event that we do get some of this funding.
Do you want that to come to a board meeting or a board brief item that's available?
I guess it'll depend on whether we are going to discuss prioritization
Okay.
or.
Maybe you could come first as a board brief item in terms of the list of what's available, and then we could follow it up with if we see what the stimulus
We-
money might have.
We had a discussion about this last, I think it was Thursday, and Dave was working on a list of projects that were already approved by the board. And I expected that to come to board brief. Now, without Dave being here, I can't give you an assurance that that will be on the board brief this Friday. But I expected it to come to the board brief, and I expected, based upon what he had to say, to either take that list in stride and publish that so that people would know what projects we had on the list all ready to go, or that we'd have to have some board prioritization or further board discussion. So I was just waiting for his evaluation so that we could decide whether to bring it back to a board meeting. I'll tell you what, though, we've got it on the board brief list already. We'll put it on a board agenda item list, and then we'll judge
How that's going,
based on
okay.
what we get.
Well, at this point, we've come, yes, Mr. Aaron?
I presume that at some point we will hear from Alan Hilton as to what his progress is and what he's been doing.
And you would have had that tonight, but
But
we
we knew the
knew
basic
that
aid
we were out of
I
time.
understood that totally.
So we'll have to put that on the March 10 meeting, and that's also the meeting, this next meeting is also the meeting that we have FICMAC coming back to us to give us some preliminary report.
Okay. We will be seeing each other just this Friday for a joint City Council and Santa Barbara School District Board meeting. But with that, we've come to the end of our agenda. And with no objections, the meeting is adjourned.